Chapter 1364. Zhuge Wanqiu looked at Su Yunxing with a strange gaze. After he finished, she asked softly, "If I didn't wait alone all these years and became cultivation partners with someone else, would you have never told me these words, senior brother Su?" Su Yunxing said, "If you were fated to be with someone else, I naturally wouldn't affect your life, your relationship with your partner, and your mind." Zhuge Wanqiu asked, "Isn't it messing with my mind now?" "Senior brother Su, you're acting on your own again." Su Yunxing sighed softly. "Now, it's only fair for you to know all this. I've delayed you for so many years, and I don't want you to waste any more time." Zhuge Wanqiu walked to Su Yunxing step by step. The two were inches apart, and Zhuge Wanqiu stared into his eyes. "How can you be sure that in my heart, these years were wasted? How can you know that if I continue to wait, I'll be wasting time?" Her rare aggressiveness made Su Yunxing fall into silence for a while. After a long time, Su Yunxing said softly, "If I told you everything back then, things would be completely different today. Unfortunately, I made a huge mistake." Zhuge Wanqiu's gaze gradually softened. "Before you entered the Xiantian realm, you had me in your heart, right? All these years, you've always had me, right?" Su Yunxing didn't hesitate, nor did he deny it. "Yes. You, Miaoying, and Master, the three most important people in my life. My little sister and I have depended on each other since we were young. She's the only family I care about, my true family. For her, even if my conscience condemns me, I'm still willing to be the secret spy of the great Zhou dynasty. Master changed my fate, allowing me to break free from the dark shackles of the past. In order to answer to him and the sect, I'm willing to endure any punishment. As for you, I once dreamed of accompanying you hand in hand and going into the future together, but because of my past, I only dared to exist in my fantasy. I owe you, but I don't know how to repay you. I can't shamelessly say that I'll take care of you in the future, and that treating you well is my repayment. That's me taking advantage of you, but it's not compensation." Silently, Zhuge Wanqiu looked at Su Yunxing. "In the end, you still can't get over your own heart. Have you ever asked me if I need your compensation and what kind of compensation I want?" Su Yunxing lowered his head and revealed a rare look of vulnerability. He moved his lips and revealed a bitter smile. "Yeah, I'm acting on my own again." He sighed softly, looked up at Zhuge Wanqiu, and said softly, "Wanqiu, I'm very sorry." Although his mind was sensitive and meticulous, Su Yunxing and Zhuge Wanqiu were both inexperienced when it came to matters of the heart between a man and a woman. Because of his personality, Su Yunxing was more reserved in this aspect. He could only make clumsy guesses about the other party's thoughts, but had never really communicated or expressed them. Even though Su Yunxing had toiled in the heaven-profound realm for 100 years, he had never come into contact with the matters between men and women. Even though his mental state was much more mature now, he still lacked the slightest experience in this aspect. Zhuge Wanqiu tilted her head and looked at Yunxing. Suddenly, she said softly, "Senior brother Su, please wait here. I'll be back soon." Even though I've told senior brother Ing Rosa more than once, he insisted on waiting for you to come back and listen to my thoughts. After so many years, I owe him an explanation. Su Yunxing raised his eyebrows slightly and widened his eyes. Countless words welled up in his chest, but he forcefully suppressed them. In the end, he only said one word. "Okay." Zhuge Wanqiu brushed past him and walked out of the bamboo house toward the Qiantian palace. It was only now that Zhuge Wanqiu's cheeks gradually blushed. She lowered her head slightly, just like a young girl who was also not good at expressing her feelings in the past. She walked a few steps, and the blush on her face gradually faded. Her gaze was still gentle, but there was a hint of determination. She said softly, "Daddy, let me be willful for once." A figure appeared in the void beside her. It was a middle-aged man in a white robe. He was tall, handsome, and had a pair of light golden eyebrows. He was Zhuge Wanqiu's father, a Dao integration stage cultivator, blazing Sun Dao Lord Zhuge Zhan. Zhuge Zhan walked beside Zhuge Wanqiu and looked at her lovingly. Silly girl, I can arrange other things for you, but only you can make the decision on this matter. Actually, in my opinion, it doesn't matter if it's Su Yunxing or Ing Rosa, both of them aren't worthy of you, my darling daughter. But since you like them, I can only help you sweep away all obstacles. You've waited for dozens of years. Until today, until now, when you know everything, your heart has not changed. I know what you're thinking. Do what you want to do. Zhuge Zhan furrowed his light golden eyebrows. But if he betrays you in the future, I will kill him even if I have to risk offending the master of the Celestial Gate and EZ. I will not care about the consequences. Hearing that, Zhuge Wanqiu shook her head. Father, that's not what I want to see. If such a day really comes, it's because I've sown the bitter fruit of my own doing. I'll naturally bear all the consequences myself. I have no regrets. The smile on her face brightened. But I believe that I am not wrong. At this age, no matter who I choose, he will no longer be as passionate as fire. Instead, he will be like a clear spring in the mountains, lasting for a long time. Zhuge Zhan said slowly, actually, if I had to choose between the two of them, I would prefer Irosa. At least he's straightforward and straightforward. It's not easy for someone like him to wait for you all this time. Zhuge Wanqiu said, daughter and Ing Luozha Xixiang, becoming Taoist companions who walk the same path of cultivation together is not impossible, but they will only be Taoist companions, not husband and wife, because daughter only feels gratitude towards Ing Luozha Xixiang, not love. If I use love to repay Senior Ing Rosa's perseverance and sacrifice, what should I do when I meet a man who is more loyal and gives more than Senior Ing Rosa? Of course, I am thinking too much. But if there is more than one person like Senior Ing Rosa waiting for me, who will I give myself to now? Hearing her say this, Zhuge Zhan's expression softened a bit, but there was also a strong sense of loss in his eyes. His daughter had really grown up. This feeling made Zhuge Zhan's heart uncomfortable, and the complicated feelings inside were not to be told to outsiders. Zhuge Zhan's figure disappeared, and Zhuge Wanqiu came to the Qian Tian Palace alone. When she arrived outside one of the side halls, she saw a woman with a cold expression and a stubborn look standing at the door. When the woman saw Zhuge Wanqiu, she first bowed. Disciple Yuan Xing greets Uncle Master Tianhong. Zhuge Wanqiu naturally recognized the woman in front of her. She was Ing Rosa's disciple, Meng Honglu. Among the 3 generations of direct disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, she was one of the top figures in terms of combat skills. However, this woman's personality was more aloof, and she rarely interacted with disciples of other sections. She was stubborn, cold and sharp. In terms of cultivation talent alone, although she was a rare top genius in the entire Divine Land, when compared to Xianmen Tianzong, she was not considered one of the top talents, and could only be said to be above average. However, Meng Honglu was of the same lineage as her master Ing Rosa. Her talent in combat was shocking, and her combat skills were extraordinary. Among the 3 generations of direct disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, her combat skills were firmly in the top 5. When she traveled outside, she often had the battle record of defeating stronger opponents, and her reputation was illustrious. Meng Honglu always had a cold expression on her face, and rarely had a smile on her face. Zhuge Wanqiu also knew the reason. This woman was extremely competitive, and had always hoped to stand out among her peers. She was the first among the Yuan generation disciples to form the Golden Elixir. However, just like Su Yunxing and his master Ing Rosa, as more talents emerged in Xianmen Tianzong, there were more and more top experts among the 3 generations of direct disciples. If Meng Honglu, Qing Wu Pavilion's 3rd generation direct disciple, Lian Huazhao, Fan Lin House's 3rd generation direct disciple, Chun Fanga, Desolate Sky Valley's 3rd generation direct disciple, Shi Yang, Funtianya's third-generation direct disciple, Duanmu Hong, and Jiao Qing, who was also from the Qian Tian Palace, could still compete, there was one more person that pressed down on her heart like a mountain. That was the publicly recognized number 1 of Xianmen Tianzong's third-generation direct disciple, the Snow Wind Valley's third-generation direct disciple, Guo Zonghuang. Whether it was the speed of cultivation or the strength of those in the same realm, Guo Zonghuang was the best. At the same time, he was respected both inside and outside the sect, and had the demeanor of a leader that everyone thought highly of. Meng Honglu did not hate Guo Zonghuang, and only continued to squeeze out her potential and cultivate with all her might. However, as long as she could not beat Guo Zonghuang, she naturally could not be happy. However, in the eyes of Zhuge Wanqiu, Ingroza, Zhao Huan, and the others, because of Guo Zonghuang's existence, Meng Honglu was stronger than expected. At ease. Zhuge Wanqiu nodded and said to Meng Honglu. Meng Honglu straightened up, looked at Zhuge Wanqiu and said, "Master Tianhong, Master is waiting for you." Not long after Su Yunxing returned to the Qian Tian Palace, he immediately went to Desolate Sky Valley, but Ingroza clearly knew that he had returned. However, Ingroza did not chase after him to Desolate Sky Valley, but remained in the Qian Tian Palace. Zhuge Wanqiu pushed the door open and entered the hall. The hall's floor was empty. There were no tables or chairs, not even a praying mat. A thin, dark-skinned young man sat on the square stone floor. His eyes seemed to flash with lightning as he looked at Zhuge Wanqiu. "He's back." Ingroza looked at Zhuge Wanqiu calmly. "After you saw him, you came to me immediately. In other words, you still chose him." Zhuge Wanqiu sighed softly. "I'm sorry, senior brother." The person in front of her was a late-stage Yuanian cultivator like her, but with his original pace, he should have reached the primordial soul realm like Yang Tai and the others. Ingroza slowly closed his eyes, his lightning-like gaze disappearing. "Su Yunxing should be the one apologizing to you, but you don't have to apologize to me. All these years, every time I asked you, you always firmly rejected me. From the moment I made things clear, you never gave me any hope, and I was the one who thought too highly of myself. Since you're so heartless, I'll let it go. I'm not the type to be entangled, but I'm not willing to lose to a coward who left without saying goodbye and disappeared without a trace," Ingroza said indifferently. "But since he's finally back and your decision hasn't changed, then there's no need to say anything more between us. You may leave." Zhuge Wanqiu looked at the dark, skinny young man in front of her and fell into silence. After a long while, she silently bowed and took her leave. That day, Xianmen Tianzong, the second-generation direct elder of the Qian Tian Palace, Lord Tianbi, reached the primordial soul realm. Chapter 1365. On the third floor of the Hidden Scriptures Tower, Zhu Yi looked in the direction of his cave abode, the Qian Tian Palace, and sensed the changes in magic power there. Beside him sat a white-haired youth with an indifferent expression. He also looked in the direction of the Qian Tian Palace and asked, "Is it Ingroza?" Zhu Yi nodded and said, "That's right." He broke through the bottleneck of the past and successfully became an essence soul. This white-haired youth was Lin Feng's third disciple, the extreme Tao exalted Wang Lin. Beside Wang Lin was another purple-clothed youth. This youth's pupils were black and white, like yin and yang. He was Lin Feng's fifth disciple, the yin-yang Tao Lord, Yang Qing. Yang Qing also looked in the direction of the Qian Tian Palace, then at the desolate Heaven Valley, and finally at Zhu Yi. "Is it okay to just ignore it?" Zhu Yi said. Marshal Ni Sky Rainbow went to seeing Rosa immediately after seeing Yunxing, which means that her choice hasn't changed. If that's the case, if Rosa can't break through the bottleneck and become an essence soul so quickly after seeing Rosa, then I'll really be worried. But now that Rosa has successfully become an essence soul, everything is fine. As for Yunxing and Sky Rainbow, let them deal with this themselves. Yang Qing nodded and said, "That's right. Wang Lin asked, "How is Yun Song? Is he ready to take that final step?" Yang Qing smiled and said, "In order to ensure his safety, he's held back for so long. Now, he's naturally ready and can break through to the essence soul realm in a few days." Over the years, Yun Song has gotten used to it. Although he's easily anxious and irritable because of his burning sun constitution, he can already adjust himself. Zhu Yi and Wang Lin nodded and said, "That's good. After he becomes an essence soul, he won't have to worry about this anymore. Yun Song's future will be smooth." "That's right, it's the last trial. It's not wrong to be cautious. After this trial, everything will be clear." Yang Qing looked at Wang Lin and said with a smile, "Eldest senior brother has Tian Song and Tian Qing, and now second senior brother has Tian Tai and Tian Bai. I wonder when will third senior brother have a second primordial spirit?" Wang Lin said, "As long as he survives today, he will have nothing to worry about. He shouldn't be any later than Yun Kong." Zhu Yi and Yang Qing looked at each other. "Are we leaving today?" Wang Lin nodded. "That's right. She left the mountain today and should have returned home by now." In Zhu Yi's eyes, he could vaguely see the Taoist talisman of Yi appearing, flickering with a faint light, constantly rotating. Wherever his gaze reached, the void of the scripture depository became deep and vast, as if a dome was right in front of him. There seemed to be an invisible figure in the sky. This person wore the sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, the rivers, and the seas as clothes. He looked down at everything in the sky indifferently. The person's face was almost blank, without any facial features. However, it was such a figure without facial features that exuded an incomparably majestic aura. It was as if he was the truth of this world, the ruler of this world, the maker of all rules, and represented the vast great Tao of heaven and earth. There seemed to be thousands of emotions flowing out from this person, but upon closer inspection, it felt as if everything did not exist. It was a void empty. Deep in the heart of love, love turns thin. The way of great forgetting emotion is not heartless. The projection of Zhu Yi's gaze was impressively displaying one of the two supreme Tao techniques of the Void Temple, the way of great forgetting emotion. If there were direct disciples of Taishu Temple here, they would be able to recognize that the projection of Zhu Yi's gaze was still different from the real way of Tai Wang Qing. However, if it were other cultivators outside of Taishu Temple, they would probably think that Zhu Yi and Xianmen Tianzong had already successfully comprehended this top great Tao technique. Slowly, the Taoist talisman of Yi in Zhu Yi's eyes spun. Thanks to the primordial heart demon concession mantra, although the orthodoxy is different, it has the effect of comprehending by analogy. Although it's just a simple deduction, it's enough for an experiment. Wang Lin nodded slightly. Beside him, black and white light flowed in Yang Qing's eyes, like the two extremes of yin and yang. The Taoist talisman of Yi also appeared in Zhu Yi's other eye, and another light burst out, forming another void, but it was completely dark. The yin and yang light in Yang Qing's eyes fell into this dark void, and immediately flowed endlessly, blending with each other. The yin and yang light turned into two streams of air, one black and one white. They intertwined in the seemingly boundless void, forming a cycle that seemed infinite. Yin and yang transformed into each other, supporting each other, gradually evolving into a momentum of creation. As yin and yang blended, everything was born in the endless void. Wang Lin's eyes moved slightly. Reverse. The black and white streams of air that were constantly rotating and blending suddenly stopped, and actually began to reverse, no longer evolving and expanding, but began to shrink continuously. As the yin and yang qi shrank, the endless void at this moment seemed to collapse as well. With the yin and yang qi as the center, it gathered towards a point and kept collapsing. On the other side, the sky that seemed to be Tai Wang Qing and the heavenly Tao was in harmony, suddenly changed at this moment. The invisible figure seemed to be gradually disappearing. It was not just invisible in the visual sense, but the entire body had become non-existent. However, under the sky, the ethereal and vast feeling became more and more mysterious, enveloping the surroundings. Yang Qing said, "We still need some confirmation before we can further clarify it." Zhu Yi nodded. "The people in Taishu Temple will study it, and there will be feedback from the great Tao of heaven and earth. At that time, we will naturally be able to feel it." Yang Qing turned to look at Wang Lin. "Our previous comprehension should have already caused the people in Taishu Temple to feel it through the great Tao of heaven and earth. They should have already sensed it. Martial nephew Tianqi, is it inappropriate for you to return alone?" Wang Lin's expression was calm, and his eyes were indifferent. "If there is really something wrong, I will be able to rush over in time." While the three of them were talking, in the void outside the vast 1,000 domains, in one of the medium-class worlds, the void broke open, and a woman in purple walked out from it. There was not the slightest trace of smoke or fire. The broken void did not have the slightest distortion or fracture, but was neat and tidy, as if an ordinary door had been opened. This woman in purple had a beautiful appearance, and looked to be in her 20s. She did not have much of an astonishing aura around her, but those who knew her did not dare to look down on her in the slightest. This was because she was the second-generation true disciple first-seat elder of Xianmen Tianzong's Fan Lin Ju, Li Xingfei. Although she was not like her senior sister Dao Yuding, who had already reached the primordial soul realm, her cultivation had long reached the late Yuanying stage. Li Xingfei's cultivation was slow at first, but then it sped up. Under the guidance of her master Wang Lin, her progress in these years was quite significant. Originally, she should have reached the primordial soul realm together with Huang Zhenting and Yang Tai, but because of some unexpected matters, she was delayed. Today, she was here to deal with these matters. Li Xingfei's expression was calm as she walked in the void, not disturbing anyone. She descended near a city in this medium-class world. There was a manor outside the city, called the Li family manor. This was the place where Li Xingfei's parents lived. The manor seemed ordinary, but everyone within 1,000 miles knew that it was better to offend the city lord of the nearby big city than to provoke this seemingly ordinary manor. Although the Li family's environment was not bad in the past, its current prestige was naturally because of Li Xingfei. Even if Li Xingfei's Fan Lin Ju and Xianmen Tianzong were not taken into account, just Li Xingfei alone was outstanding in the entire vast 1,000 domains. Li Xingfei entered the manor, but the servants did not seem to see her at all. Li Xingfei calmly walked all the way to the backyard. When her parents saw their daughter suddenly appear in front of them, they couldn't help but be a little surprised. "Father, mother." Li Xingfei was the first to greet her parent. Her father smiled and asked, "Why didn't you tell us that Jun Chen was coming back? Did you come back alone, or did you come with a fellow disciple?" Hearing her father call her by her nickname as usual, ripples gradually appeared in Li Xingfei's eyes that were as calm as water. The ripples continued to spread, and in the end it was like a stormy sea. She could no longer maintain her calm. Seeing this, Li Xingfei's parents couldn't help but be even more surprised. Their daughter had always been calm and steady since she was young. Now that her cultivation was profound and she had a high status, even in front of them, they had never seen her so excited. Li Xingfei took a deep breath and softly said, "Father, mother, first take a look at these things and see if they are suitable." As she spoke, she took out a jade talisman and crushed it. A ray of light immediately flew out from the jade talisman. Under the illumination of this light, the space in the big house suddenly became distorted and changed. The vast and misty sky appeared in front of the family of three. When Li Xingfei's parents saw this, their eyes flickered slightly. Li Xingfei's mother smiled and said, "Child, we don't know anything about your cultivation. If you show it to us, won't that be?" She gradually couldn't finish her sentence. Li Xingfei's mother looked at the illusion of light and shadow in front of her, and her eyes gradually became dull. This is, she suddenly stood up and stared at the illusion of light and shadow. After a while, she suddenly turned to look at her husband. This is really, Li Xingfei's father also stood up from his chair in shock. He stared at the illusion of light and shadow for a long time. His eyes flashed with a brilliance that Li Xingfei had never seen before. At this moment, she really felt that her parents were a little strange to her. No, it's not the same. After a long time, Li Xingfei's father let out a long breath. Li Xingfei's mother listened to him and stared carefully for a while. Finally, she also nodded. It's really different. Their eyes fell on Li Xingfei at the same time. At this moment, Li Xingfei's emotions calmed down and she said calmly, "Father, Mother, the two of you really do recognize this supreme Wangqing Dao. Since that's the case, I wonder if you can give me some advice?" Chapter 1366. The gazes of Li Xingfei's parents fell on their daughter at this moment. The emotions contained within their gazes became somewhat complicated. Li Xingfei's father didn't say a word, but Li Xingfei's mother sighed and looked at Li Xingfei, asking, "What do you know? I didn't know until recently that you and Dad were both disciples of Taishu Temple. You weren't ordinary people like I knew, but cultivators like me, and your family background was quite extraordinary." Li Xingfei said, "If that's the case, why didn't you recommend me to Baiyun Mountain to learn martial arts? Even though you all lost your cultivation due to the destruction of the Dao heart of the supreme Wangqing Dao and had no choice but to leave White Cloud Mountain, you all have no right to arrange for me to enter the Taishu Temple, but a chance to take the test can always be fought for." Li Xingfei's mother was silent for a while, and her eyes became more complicated. "Didn't we want that? If it was really like that, we wouldn't be embarrassed today." Li Xingfei's father said, "It's okay now. You joined Xianmen Tianzong, and your cultivation is better than ours. We are also happy for you. You love Xianmen Tianzong very much. You respect your teachers and go on a blind date with them. Although we regret that you can't join Baiyun Mountain, it's not impossible now. On the other hand, the Taoist art conception that you're showing us now is similar to the supreme Wangqing Dao. What's its origin and what's its purpose?" Li Xingfei's father's expression had completely returned to normal. His eyes were as deep as the sea, without any ripples. Even though he didn't have any cultivation, now he still had a lofty momentum, which was completely different from the rich but ordinary look he used to have. Silently sitting aside, Li Xingfei's mother seemed to have completely changed. She was more elegant and noble than before. Li Xingfei replied indifferently, "This is the result of my master and a group of martial uncles studying the Taishu Temple's supreme path of Wangqing together, and then obtaining some results." Li Tianlan's father frowned slightly. "Where did your master get the original copy of the supreme Wangqing Dao?" He had a rough idea of his daughter's state of mind. He knew that his daughter had a knot in her heart with him and his wife. Originally, he didn't want to escalate the conflict with his daughter and cause their emotions to become more and more antagonistic. However, this issue was too important to them and to the Taishu Temple. If even the supreme Wangqing Dao could be leaked, it would be unthinkable. However, Li Xingfei did not seem to mind. Instead, she answered honestly, "Our sect did not obtain the original copy of the Path of Great Wangqing. This was the result of my master and the others' research. Therefore, as you can see, it should be different from the real Path of Great Wangqing." Mr. and Mrs. Li were stunned. Impossible. They instinctively intended to refute him, yet when the words had just arrived at their mouths, they couldn't help but recall the karma discussion of the Tao on Kunlun Mountain all those years ago. With a calm expression, Li Xingfei said, "Our sect's founder was a scholar of the heavens and exhausted the great Tao. Our sect's Tao is the closest to the great Tao of heaven and earth in the world. There is nothing strange about deducing other Tao technique. Of course, without many clues to refer to, it is indeed impossible for it to be completely the same as the Tao techniques of other sects, but it won't be too different. Her tone was calm and natural, without any intention of bragging. It was as if she was describing something that couldn't be more normal. After hearing this, Mr. and Mrs. Li could not help but fall into silence. Not only the supreme Wang Qing Dao, but also the void Yin Yang Dao. My master and the others have also made deductions. Li Xingfei continued, with the birth of the future Buddha and the revival of Buddhism, the missing Dharma has naturally been made up. However, in our sect, one of the 5 Rulai Sutras, the Mahavairokkana Sutra, has also been deduced in recent years. Although it may not be exactly the same as the direct lineage of Buddhism, it may not be inferior. Mr. and Mrs. Li looked at each other. Even the void Yin Yang Dao. But how could? Both of their eyes revealed a look of confusion. They subconsciously looked at the illusory scene of light that appeared after Li Xingfei crushed the jade talisman. To them, at this moment, they hoped that there was a problem within White Cloud Mountain, that someone had leaked the sect's Dao technique. In this way, although the situation was serious, the root of the problem lay with someone. It would not be like now, where they felt that the whole world was surreal. Perhaps it was out of helplessness, or perhaps it was out of love. Even though their Tao hearts had been shattered and their cultivation lost, they were still loyal to White Cloud Mountain, where they had studied in the past. As for accepting Lin Daohan's arrangement to send their daughter to Xianmen Tianzong, they were not completely free of grudges. However, the deep-rooted belief in their hearts made them full of confidence in Taishu Temple. They firmly believed that their daughter's future would ultimately be in Taishu Temple. However, as Xianmen Tianzong had risen at a completely unexpected speed over the years, especially during the war between the two worlds more than 10 years ago, and everything that had happened after the war, Li Xingfei's parents had become somewhat at a loss. Although they firmly believed in the deep foundation and powerful inheritance of their sect, Xianmen Tianzong was not the shooting star that many people had previously thought it was. This new force had replaced Taishu Temple and become the great sun that shone over the divine land, illuminating the vast 1,000 domains as if it was daytime, causing all the stars to pale in comparison. Even Taishu Temple had to temporarily retreat in front of it, avoiding its sharp edge. Such a change made Li Xingfei's father and mother, who still considered themselves disciples of Taishu Temple, panic in their hearts. Because of the special reasons of the way of Supreme Wang Qing, their future had always been in Taishu Temple. However, would their daughter's future still be in Taishu Temple? Whether it was Li Xingfei's father or mother, they had always cared for Li Xingfei. As a result, the conflict between their own interests and the interests of their daughter had gradually become obvious, causing them to become more and more flustered. Over the years, Taishu Temple had been recuperating, keeping a low profile. Naturally, Lin Daohan would not make use of Li Xingfei's family, the hidden chess piece that he had planted many years ago. This allowed Li Xingfei's parents to breathe a sigh of relief. They could watch their daughter go higher and higher in Xianmen Tianzong with peace of mind. However, when they dreamed at night, their worries would always float in their hearts. Now, Li Xingfei's sudden arrival had revealed all of this, making it impossible for them to continue deceiving themselves. Father, mother, my master and the others have long known of your identity. They already knew about it before the war between the two realms. Li Xingfei said softly, "It's just that they didn't want to make things difficult for me, so they have been holding back. My master has long known about your situation, so he waited until today to ask me to come back and clarify things with you." Li Xingfei's father and mother's gazes froze slightly at the same time. "What do you mean?" Li Xingfei looked at the illusory world of light and shadow that had manifested from the projection of the Way of Supreme Wang Qing. The Way of Supreme Wang Qing of Taishu Temple is indeed a unique way of Tao. Even the Grandmaster of our sect has praised it. However, this way itself has flaws, which is why your Taoist heart has been broken, your cultivation has been lost, and you can't change to another way of Tao. Upon hearing this, Li Xingfei's father and mother's faces darkened, but they did not refute Li Xingfei. If it were other disciples of Taishu Temple, perhaps they would have a different reaction, but the two of them would not. Moreover, in the past, they had heard the elders of their sect occasionally mention this problem. The top-notch experts of Taishu Temple would not deceive themselves and ignore the problems in their way of Tao. They were also constantly seeking ways to improve it, and in fact, they had been continuously learning from it over the years. Li Xingfei said, "This way of Tao, other than the study of my master and the others, the Grand Master of our sect has also given pointers, and this way of Supreme Wang Qing has already been greatly improved. Due to time constraints, there may still be flaws, and it cannot be fully mastered. However, if a powerful expert in Taishu Temple who practices this way of Supreme Wang Qing obtains it, they can verify it with each other and further study it, and the flaws in the way of Supreme Wang Qing may be remedied." She glanced at Li Xingfei's father and mother. "This is undoubtedly a good thing for you, as well as other Taishu cultivators who have lost their cultivation due to the way of Supreme Wang Qing being broken." Upon hearing this, Li Xingfei's parents' hearts were in turmoil. Li Xingfei's father immediately focused all his attention on the illusion of light and shadow, and carefully studied it. On the other hand, Li Xingfei's mother looked at her daughter with a complicated expression. "Chen Jun, what are you?" Li Xingfei sighed. "Mother, my master said that if the Grand Master and the others study the way of Supreme Wang Qing like this, they will be touched by the great Tao of heaven and earth. The top-notch experts of Baiyun Mountain's Taishu Temple will feel the feedback at the first moment. They should be very clear about what all this means." Li Xingfei's mother fell silent upon hearing this, and understood that this matter was no longer something they could decide. Li Xingfei also did not say anything else. She walked to her mother's side, sat down with her, and held her hand gently. After a long time, Li Xingfei's father closed his eyes, and then slowly opened them. There was a faint mysterious brilliance circulating in his eyes, and his entire temperament seemed to have changed again. He turned to look at Li Xingfei and her mother, and slowly nodded. "I'm afraid it's true." Although Li Xingfei's father's tone was calm, it was clear that his voice was trembling slightly, perhaps out of excitement or fear. Li Xingfei smiled. "Father, mother, please contact the senior experts of Taishu Temple, they might be looking for a way in this regard." Li Xingfei's father and mother trembled at the same time, while Li Xingfei continued smiling. "This is the reason why I'm here today. From today onwards, your future will be decided by yourselves. Even if you want to return to Baiyun Mountain and return to your sect, it might not be a bad thing. And my sect will always be Xianmen Tianzong." Li Xingfei's father and mother both took a deep breath. There were no longer any flaws in the way of Supreme Wang Qing. This not only meant that the cultivators of this path in Taishu Temple would no longer fall into the abyss, it also meant that their cultivation would be smoother and their strength would become stronger. Moreover, as Li Xingfei had said, apart from the way of Supreme Wang Qing, there was also the way of void yin yang. Li Xingfei's father asked softly, "Xianmen Tianzong, what do you want?" Chapter 1367. Father Li and Mother Li looked at their daughter in front of them, but their expressions had become solemn. They no longer looked like they were chatting idly, but rather a conversation between a Taishu Temple cultivator and a Xianmen Tianzong cultivator. After the Taishu Temple cultivator obtained the results of Xianmen Tianzong's cultivation, they would completely perfect the two Taoist technique. Xianmen Tianzong would also receive feedback, and they would also gain something. However, it was difficult to say who would gain more. In the eyes of Father Li and Mother Li, as well as the vast majority of people in the world, there was no doubt that the Taishu Temple would benefit more and improve more. Thinking of this, Li Xingfei's parents couldn't help but hesitate in the face of such a great gift in front of them. Li Xingfei listened to her father's question and shook her head. "My master only said that these things can be brought to you, but he didn't say how to deal with them. If father and mother have doubts, there is no harm in contacting the elders of your sect and telling them about the situation. Father Li said, "That's right. This kind of matter should be discussed with people of a higher level." Since it wasn't Li Xingfei's personal bestowal, then the entanglement within was destined to be something that people of their level could not participate in. Li Xingfei's weight was also not enough. She was only responsible for leading the way. This was naturally because of her special identity. After knowing that the details of Li Xingfei and herself had long been known by the higher-ups of Xianmen Tianzong, the Li couple felt slightly awkward facing their own daughter. Although they had never spoken about it, and even the husband and wife had never exchanged their opinions, in the depths of their hearts, as time passed and as Xianmen Tianzong became more and more powerful, the doubts and uneasiness in their hearts also increased day by day. For them, the influence of the sect's cultivation was deeply rooted, and because of the special Taoist techniques, it was their only hope to restore their cultivation. Their sense of identity towards Taishu Temple had never wavered. However, regarding their daughter's future, whether or not Taishu Temple was the best choice and home, they were no longer as resolute as they were in the past. Now that they knew the cause and effect of the matter, and after listening to Li Xingfei's clear stance, the Li couple didn't feel angry. Instead, they heaved a sigh of relief. However, as soon as these emotions appeared, the two of them were terrified. As the direct disciples of the Taishu Temple, their confidence in their own sect had been shaken to such an extent. The two of them looked at each other and were speechless for a moment. Mother Li sat quietly with Li Xingfei by her side. Father Li walked out of the house and sighed as he walked. "We can't contact the sect directly. We need to go to a place to leave a mark and wait passively for the sect to contact us." Li Xingfei nodded. This was to be expected. If there was a treasure rich in spiritual energy in the family that could transmit sound, even if it could hide from her, it couldn't hide from Second Marshal Uncle Zhu Yi, who had come to investigate back then. Mother Li looked at Li Xingfei and asked softly, "Chenjun, do you blame us?" "I don't blame you. It's just that when I first found out about this, I found it a little hard to believe," Li Xingfei said calmly. "Although you have your own demands, your daughter knows that you're following the best and safest path you know, paving the path of my life for me. You hope that my life can be smooth sailing. However, I also have my own thoughts, not to mention the fact that our sect has become more and more prosperous over the years. Even if our sect is weaker than the Taishu Temple, as a disciple of the Celestial Sect, I won't abandon it, and I won't join another sect." Li Xingfei held her mother's hand and said calmly, If there is a battle between the Taishu Temple and our sect, and if our sect is defeated, your daughter will live and die with the sect. I just hope that when the time comes, I won't have to fight with father and you." Although she said this, Li Xingfei's expression didn't change at all. Clearly, she was full of confidence in the sect and didn't think that day would really come. When Li Xingfei's mother heard this, she smiled bitterly. "Silly girl, if that day really comes, how can your father and I watch you walk on that path?" After a moment of silence, Li Xingfei said slowly, "Mother, my master asked me to bring the Tao to see you. You can actually try to change to the way of Supreme Wang Qing derived by the seniors of our sect. Maybe it's possible to rebuild your Taoist heart." After the discussion of cause and effect, the Buddhist monk Dade succeeded in breaking and building. "You've cultivated the way of Supreme Wang Qing from the Taishu Temple. There's no need to provide it to our sect. You can practice it yourself. It's not impossible." Li Xingfei's mother looked at her daughter in silence. Li Xingfei said, "Right now, there's no difference between you and leaving the Taishu Temple. If you really recover your cultivation through Xianmen Tianzong's Tao, your father and I will naturally owe Xianmen Tianzong a favor. Moreover, even without this, your heart belongs to Xianmen Tianzong, so we won't make things difficult for you." Li Xingfei's mother shook her head. She was a little lost in thought. "However, when I entered the White Cloud Mountain to learn, I became a disciple of Taishu. Back then, my Taoist heart was broken. Although it was related to the Tao of our sect, it was also related to us. After that, we left the White Cloud Mountain to live a normal life, not because we were expelled by our sect, but because we wanted to rebuild our Taoist heart. After that, we received instructions to send you to Xianmen Tianzong voluntarily. We wanted to use our useless mortal bodies to contribute to the sect. The sect doesn't owe us anything, so why should we leave? Li Xingfei's mother looked at Li Xingfei kindly. Supreme Wang Qing is not heartless. Chen Jun, you're loyal to your sect. Aren't your father and I the same? Li Xingfei nodded and replied, Yes, mother. I misspoke just now. She had already realized it when she said it. However, her parents were close, so she was worried. Li Xingfei's mother stretched out her hand and gently brushed past Li Xingfei's temples. She tidied her hair and smiled. Although we have different paths, we still have to admit that your sect is really generous. They take good care of their disciples. They're so considerate that you came to us to inform us first. At this point, she laughed bitterly. However, your esteemed master and the others, as well as the founding ancestor of your sect, are truly extraordinary people. If they really deduced the way of supreme indifference out of thin air and obtained such tangible results, I still find it hard to believe even now. Li Xingfei's lips curled up slightly. She smiled faintly. When I cultivated the Dharma of heaven and earth and reached the later stage of Yuanying, didn't you also find it hard to believe, mother? Li Xingfei's mother smiled and shook her head. That's true. You still have fellow disciples in your sect. Their cultivation speed is so fast that your father and I are amazed. After all, in White Cloud Mountain, she shook her head again as she spoke. Taishu Temple used to be known as the gathering place of geniuses. There were countless young talents in the sect. Not only were their cultivators outstanding, but their cultivation speed was also very fast, far surpassing other forces in the Divine Land. Although the number of disciples was limited, each of them was an elite cultivator. Any one of them was enough to amaze people in the outside world. At such a young age, their future was limitless. Now, Taishu Temple was actually far superior to the cultivators of other forces in this aspect. However, its reputation in this aspect had become low and weak. This was because Xianmen Tianzong was even more amazing than Taishu Temple in this aspect. Li Xingfei's mother held Li Xingfei's hand and looked up at the ceiling. She murmured, Let's leave everything to the elders of the sect to handle. What happens next is not something we can interfere with. Li Xingfei nodded silently. Silently sat with her mother. The manor seemed to have regained its peace. When Li Xingfei's father contacted Lin Daohan, who was now the current head of Taishu Temple, after a short silence, Lin Daohan simply said, Since the other party already knows your identity and your daughter is determined, then all the previous arrangements will be abolished. You can live in peace. The monastery will make a decision about the Taoist method later. If it can really help you recover your cultivation, we will naturally not make it difficult for you. After you recover your cultivation, you can return to White Cloud Mountain or follow your daughter to Kunlun Mountain. It's up to you. Even if you go to Kunlun Mountain, the monastery will not make it difficult for you. After ending the communication, Lin Daohan looked up at the sky. Previously, the feedback of the Great Way of Heaven and Earth said that someone had touched the roots of the Supreme Wang Qing Dao and the Void Yin-Yang Dao. It was really Xianmen Tianzong's doing. What happened next was not known by the Li family. Instead, it was the negotiation between Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple. As for what had happened during this period of time, the two organizations kept it a secret. No outsider knew, but the peak experts of the heaven primal world could all sense that the laws of the world had been constantly trembling in recent days. On Mount Yujing in Kunlun Mountain, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Yang Qing, and Li Yuanfang sat opposite each other in the Tower of Scriptures. Li Yuanfang said softly, Lin Daohan can't be underestimated. Zhu Yi's fingers lightly tapped on the short table, containing a unique rhythm. He and his master Yen Nanlai and his grandmaster Tai Daoist should have the same ideology. They are all extreme conservatives in the internal factions of Taishu Temple. It is not surprising that they have such a reaction. Yang Qing looked at Wang Lin. Let Tianqi stay with her family for a while longer? Wang Lin replied, It depends on her own will. This barrier has been passed. For her, there is no longer any big danger in the road ahead. Yang Qing nodded and said, That's good. Speaking of which, fourth sister and youngest sister have not come out of seclusion yet? Li Yuanfang said, Fourth sister has already succeeded. She is just nourishing the magic treasure. Youngest sister is still a little bit behind. He frowned slightly. It has exceeded the expected time, but I don't know why. Yang Qing said, Youngest sister knows her limits. Compared to her and fourth sister, I am more worried that Tianhao may not be able to come back in time, and eldest brother himself. It's okay if others don't come, but if eldest brother can't come, it will be a little. Hearing this, Zhu Yi and Wang Lin also laughed and shook their heads. Li Yuanfang replied with a serious face, There are still 2 days before the appointed time that eldest brother mentioned. It is not overdue. Chapter 1368. 2 days' time passed by very quickly, and Xiao Yan clearly disappointed Li Yuanfang. When the agreed date arrived, he still did not exit closed-door training. This made Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others somewhat helpless. Yang Qing comforted them and said, After all, there are 2 groups of people who are secretly holding eldest brother back. The situation is beyond expectations, but it is not unacceptable. Even Li Yuanfang, who had always been serious, nodded when he heard this. He sighed. There is no problem if eldest senior brother does not come out today, but if he continues to delay, he might not be able to make it in time. Yu Hongyan, who was on the side, said, According to etiquette, eldest brother does not have to be present, but he and Miss Zhen have not seen each other for a long time, and they arranged to meet this time. Yang Qing said, There are still 10 days, we can still make it. 10 days was specially left to be used in case of similar situations. For cultivators, 10 days was so short that it was almost negligible. Once in meditation, not to mention 10 days, even 10 years or 100 years was nothing. But cultivators who had reached the cultivation level of Yang Qing and the others were extremely precise in their control of time and themselves. If there were no special accidents, or if they changed their minds at the last minute, then being precise to the instant was nothing. If they said that they would be in seclusion for a year, they would be in seclusion for a year, not a day more, not a day less. Even 2 hours, a quarter of an hour, the time it takes for a joss stick to burn, or even the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, there would not be any deviation. As for Luo Qingwu, because of a little accident, even though she came out of seclusion late, she did not exceed the time limit by too much. Very quickly, she came out of seclusion and quietly waited for eldest senior brother Xiao Yan with the other senior brothers. Therefore, 10 days of free time was enough, and for Zhu Yi and the others, if they wanted to rush to a certain place, it would not take too much time. However, Xiao Yan's situation this time seemed to be no small matter. The day was approaching, but there was still no sign of him. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Yu Hongyan, Yang Qing, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qingwu looked at each other and smiled bitterly. You can head to Longevity City first, and make preparations to communicate with the cultivators from the ancient dynasty. Your eldest senior brother and I will be there soon. Lin Feng's voice came into the ears of the disciples at this time. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others heard this and immediately answered together, Yes, Master. After a short pause, Zhu Yi said, Master, can 7th junior brother return from the void battlefield? Lin Feng said, He will be able to catch up. I think he will be a little later than you, and a little earlier than me and your eldest brother. Then the disciples will prepare to move. Eldest senior brother Fontienya's disciples will travel with us. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others bid farewell to Lin Feng and returned to their respective cave residences. They arranged the people to stay behind and arranged various matters after they left the mountain. Then, they gathered the accompanying disciples and prepared to move together. In Fontienya's branch, although Xiao Yan was not there, his disciples already knew what was going to happen next. At this time, they were waiting for Zhu Yi and the others to make arrangements. And after Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others left the mountain, Lin Feng's original body stood up on the Xian Tianbao branch at the peak of Jade Capital Mountain. There was brilliance flickering in his eyes as he silently calculated in his heart. After a short while, his eyelids slightly narrowed and he opened his palm. In the middle of his palm, a dark red talisman light flowed with an extremely ferocious aura. Lin Feng crushed the talisman and a red light appeared in front of him. The red light opened up something that looked like a door in front of Lin Feng. He stepped into it, and purple runes flew out of his eyes, fusing with the dark red door, and gradually extending out a passage. Lin Feng walked in the passageway. Separated by this not too stable passageway, he could faintly see all kinds of devastating calamities and tribulations outside the passageway barrier. This was the Nether Sea, one of the 7 seas of Tianyuan. The Yellow Spring's true water, the Nether Evil Flame, the mysterious Heaven Calamity Flame, the 9 Underworlds Cold Wind, the Blood River True Water, the Infinite Astral Fiend, and other evil powers filled the world, turning it into a scene of doomsday. The destructive demonic fire, the monstrous flood, and the terrifying storm that swept out of control covered the sky and the earth. It was endless and did not stop for a moment. It made people feel that even the terrifying hell was more peaceful than this place. And in the center of this world, there was a towering red pillar of light. It was like a stabilizing pillar, but it also seemed like the source of all disasters. It was the most dangerous place. Although few people entered the Nether Sea, the scene inside was widely known in the great heaven primordial world. However, if someone who had seen this scene before came in again, they would be shocked and find it hard to believe. Because in the current Nether Sea, although most of the land was still chaotic and filled with disasters, there was a part of the area that was unexpectedly calm. In that area, the Yellow Spring True Water had turned into a long river, flowing silently. The Blood River True Water had turned into a stinking blood ocean, but it was calm and didn't have any ripples. The 9 Underworlds Cold Wind was like a black light floating in the sky. However, it was high up in the sky, leaving a space in front of it that was not disturbed. Underground, the Nether Evil Flame and the mysterious Heavenly Calamity Flame seemed to be in a dormant state. They no longer burned wantonly, destroying or devouring everything they came into contact with. Although the red infinite astral baleful wind continued to roar, the red mist-like demonic wind also seemed gentle at this moment. The Nether Sea was still the same Nether Sea, but at this moment it had strangely returned to a calm state. It made people feel at peace, but at the same time it was full of absurdity. It was full of contradictions and abnormalities. In particular, the Nether Sea outside this area was still surging with waves, as if it was the end of the world. However, there seemed to be an invisible barrier that divided the Nether Sea into 2 parts. Both sides did their own things, as if they were 2 completely different worlds. One side was sunny and the other side was stormy. The violent Nether Sea seemed to be trying hard to pass through the barrier and turn the peaceful area into its original state, a land of disaster like the other areas. However, the other side was completely unmoved. If one observed carefully, they would even find that this calm situation seemed to be constantly expanding, gradually changing the chaotic areas of the Nether Sea. Seeing this, Lin Feng faintly smiled and continued to stride forward, heading towards the red pillar of light. Silently, the pillar of light stood there. In the Nether Sea, it was difficult to distinguish the 4 directions, but anyone who saw the red pillar of light would have a feeling that the place where the pillar of light was located was the center of the Nether Sea. However, the space in the Nether Sea was chaotic. Although the position of the red pillar of light seemed clear, most people would never be able to approach it in their lifetime. Lin Feng used the Dharma ritual that he had prepared, and his path was unimpeded. He came near the red pillar of light. Around the pillar of light there were layers of space, and there were small worlds that looked like bubbles. After entering one of the Nether Sea realms, Lin Feng's vision darkened. He saw that this world was a red chaos. In this red chaos, it was difficult to distinguish the distance between space and space. There was no up or down, and there was no four directions. The flow of time also gave people a strange feeling, as if the past, present, and future were all one. And in this chaos, there was a figure sitting there silently. The place where he resided seemed to be the center of the world. Because of his existence, this dark red world had the concept of space and distance. When it came to this person, time became clear again. The past, present, and future were once again distinct. It was a giant that was 90 feet tall, like a god of fire. He sat on a flame lotus. The lotus was completely formed from flames, and its color constantly changed. Blue-purple, pure gold, milky white, pitch black. There was an indescribable brilliance flickering all over the body of the 90 zhang tall flame god's will. It was dazzling at one moment and dim in the next. It was like a remnant flame in the ashes, flickering between brightness and darkness. It had never been completely extinguished, and there were signs that it would reignite at any time. On the forehead of this god of fire, there was a black and white Tai Chi diagram. Slowly, it rotated in a cycle. His eyes remained closed until Lin Feng called him. Only then did his body tremble slightly, and he opened his eyes. In his eyes, thousands of calamities and tribulations in the netherworld sea surged together. Dark red light burst out from his eyes like a tide. At the same time, the red pillar of light in the center of the netherworld sea suddenly became brighter. As he opened his eyes, the vast area of the netherworld sea that had been calm before suddenly became turbulent. The invisible barrier disappeared, and the originally peaceful calamities and tribulations of the netherworld sea returned to their previous violent state, once again connecting with the other chaotic areas of the netherworld sea as one. This god of fire, the 90 feet tall figure, gradually disappeared, turning into a sea of fire. In the sea of fire, a young man wearing a black robe and wearing a purple robe appeared. He had a heroic appearance, and his facial features were exactly the same as the god of fire just now. The young man looked at Lin Feng and said with a smile, "There was a small accident and I was delayed. Master, please don't laugh at me." Lin Feng looked at the young man, shook his head, and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter to me, but don't be late for your little wife." A warm look appeared in the young man's eyes, and then his face turned bitter. "Maybe. I really have to be a little late." Meanwhile, outside the netherworld sea, in the southern part of the colossal world's divine land, a storm had gathered. Leaders of various forces had gathered here. Even if they were not the absolute leaders, they were still the most important figures in their respective forces. These people now had a common destination: the capital of the ancient dynasty, Longevity City. The ancient emperor's bloodline had recently returned to the divine land after the war between the two worlds. They had established a foothold in the southern border, and then steadily expanded to the surrounding areas. Although the Great Qin and the Great Zhou dynasty were cautious and tried their best to resist, they were still constantly being pressured. After Shi Xingyun's news had spread to the divine land, the Great Qin dynasty's situation was slightly better than the Great Zhou dynasty's, but they were also unusually passive. In particular, not long ago, the current ancient emperor of the ancient dynasty, Gu Jun, had completely completed the first tribulation and reached the Dharma-ending realm. This immediately put the Great Qin dynasty and the Great Zhou dynasty under even more pressure. Today, another major event that was related to the ancient dynasty had happened. Chapter 1369. The southern border of the Divine Land had fallen into the hands of the ancient dynasty. The entire great swamp of the ancient region was included in the ancient dynasty's territory and was moving towards the southern border of the Great Zhou dynasty. Geographically speaking, the Great Zhou dynasty had been completely cut off from the Songhai sword sect and the reincarnation sect. The two sects were now in the ancient dynasty's territory. The reincarnation sect was still keeping a low profile and biding their time. However, ever since the Dark Lord took over the position of the sect master of the reincarnation sect, he was on good terms with Xianmen Tianzong and respected the ancient dynasty. There were no conflicts between the two parties, and the situation was stable. The sect master of the Songhai sword sect, the Sword Lord of the Songhai sword sect, finally came out of seclusion after the war between the two worlds and successfully reached the void reunification stage. However, he didn't dare to fight the ancient dynasty head-on. He retreated from the continent and returned to the sea. He was now alone in the sea and didn't set foot on the mainland. However, the Songhai sword sect was more confident in facing the Great Zhou dynasty. The two parties were still close and often communicated with each other, but they were no longer subordinates like before. At the moment, the Void Temple and the Mount Shu sword sect had both sealed their mountains. Although the Buddhist sect was rejuvenated, it was hard to find a spiritual mountain at the moment. After the position of the celestial sect of Xian became more and more aloof, the human cultivation world of the divine continent gradually formed a situation where many other powers were inclined to unite and deal with the ancient dynasty together. Gu Jun and the other leaders of the ancient dynasty seemed to have foreseen this. They were neither arrogant nor rash, and they fought steadily on the divine land with ease. In the divine land, Xianmen Tianzong's status became more and more aloof, and he was more and more established as a leader. If another war between the two worlds broke out, Xianmen Tianzong would undoubtedly become the leader of the Divine Land in a state of war. Even if it wasn't for the special period of the war between the two worlds, the human cultivators in the Divine Land were also on good terms with Xianmen Tianzong and gradually moved closer to him. However, Xianmen Tianzong did not intervene in the grudges and disputes between human cultivators. However, due to the existence of Xianmen Tianzong, the overall situation was relatively stable. However, there was no doubt about the strength of the ancient dynasty. It was only natural that the other forces would join forces to resist them. The other factions were led by Great Qin and Great Zhou, and the ancient dynasty was also forming alliances with each other. Although the intensity was not high, the situation in the Divine Land could be said to be turbulent. To the ancient dynasty that had the upper hand, as long as they did not make any mistakes, they would be able to maintain their upper hand. Recently, the ancient dynasty's dominant position had been further consolidated. It wasn't an actual increase in strength, but the psychological advantage they had against other sects and forces would be more obvious. In another 3 days, it would be the day that Xianmen Tianzong's first disciple, the city lord of Flame Emperor City, Flame Emperor Xiaoyan, would be engaged to the daughter of the current ancient emperor. Not to mention the person standing behind Xiaoyan, even Xiaoyan himself is an influential figure in the current cultivation world. His influence is not the slightest bit weaker than the current ancient emperor. Although Xiaoyan had been living in seclusion since the war between the two worlds and rarely appeared in the great heaven primordial world, no one dared to look down on him. A year ago, the two sides had set a date. Xianmen Tianzong would arrive in Eternal City in 3 days. Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhen would be officially engaged, and the date of the wedding would be set. However, the most eye-catching thing was that not long ago, Xianmen Tianzong suddenly released news that Xiao Yan's teacher, the master of the mysterious gate, Lin Feng, would be personally going to Eternal City. Everyone was shocked by this news. Although the engagement required the appearance of the elders, Xiao Yan's grandfather was still alive. Although his cultivation level was limited, he was still his closest relative. As everyone knew, the master of the mysterious gate, Lin Feng, had not stepped into the world for many years. This time, he actually came personally, which was beyond everyone's expectations. Although they always knew that the master of Xian Gate cared for his direct disciple in every possible way, this kind of situation still made many people guess in their hearts that the reason he went to Longevity City this time was not only for Xiao Yan's engagement, but also for other important matters. Especially this time, when the world was invited to Longevity City to attend the ceremony, which was convened by the celestial sect of Xianmen, it made everyone even more puzzled. However, this kind of unusual action, to them, was not necessarily a bad thing. Everyone wanted to understand Lin Feng's intentions, so they all went to Eternal City. Even the Great Zhou dynasty, the Great Qin dynasty, and the Northern Militant Imperial Court, which had a tense relationship with the ancient dynasty, also sent their experts. With Xianmen Tianzong's invitation, they were not afraid that the ancient dynasty would harm them. On the other hand, if Xianmen Tianzong suddenly changed his neutral stance and fully supported the ancient dynasty to unify the Divine Land, then there would be no need for such trouble. At this moment, in Eternal City, people came and went. Streams of light constantly flashed in the void. The cultivators of the ancient dynasty had their own arrangements to receive the various guests. Facing the cultivators of the Great Zhou and Great Qin, they did not forget their etiquette. Everything was in order. The disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, under the lead of Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others, also arrived at Eternal City early. Their appearance naturally attracted the attention of the cultivators of the other clans. As for Xianmen Tianzong and the others, after the ancient dynasty settled them in their residences, they also dispersed to interact with the cultivators of the various clans who came to attend the ceremony. They were like half a host, but they would not overstep their boundaries and usurp the host's position. This caused Emperor Qin Shi Zongtong, Emperor Zhou Liangqian, Great Chanyu of the Northern Militant Imperial Court, and the others to have some doubts in their hearts. However, they naturally did not show any abnormalities on the surface. Instead, they chatted happily with Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others. Today, not to mention Lin Feng himself, even Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others' reputation and status were also becoming more and more grand, and with the emergence of primordial spirit powerhouses among the disciples under their sects, everyone's status and identity were already different from the past, and they could even talk as equals with the sect leaders of other forces. And among them, the thing that attracted the attention of the other forces was that the first seat elder of Zhu Yi's Qian Tian Palace, Yang Tai, actually came to Eternal City with Zhu Yi. On the contrary, the first seat elder of Xiao Yan's Fentianya, Tang Jun, stayed at Yujing Mountain and did not come here. Today's event was a joyous occasion for Xiao Yan. Although the engagement did not necessarily require him to be there, Xianmen Tianzong had previously said that Xiao Yan would be there in person. Now that Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others had arrived, it was naturally impossible for Xiao Yan not to come. And for such a big event, as the first disciple of Xiao Yan, Tang Jun had to run around for his master and welcome the guests. He would not stay at Fentianya like in the past. But this time, Tang Jun stayed at Yujing Mountain. According to the previous news, not only Lin Feng himself, but all of his personal disciples will also come to Longevity City to witness their eldest senior brother's happy occasion. As such, Tang Jun, as one of the leading figures of Xianmen Tianzong's second-generation direct disciples, stayed at Yujing Mountain. His duty was likely to be to stay behind and take charge of the overall situation. If this task was done by Yang Tai, there would be no special meaning. After all, Tang Jun coming to Eternal City to help his master, Xiao Yan, was a matter of course. But now this task had fallen to Tang Jun. In the eyes of the others in the Divine Land, It was a signal of extraordinary significance. After Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, and the others, the confirmation of the second-generation successor of Xianmen Tianzong seemed to gradually become clear. The more robust Tang Jun began to take the lead over Yang Tai. Although it was still very far away, and no one knew what changes would happen in this long period of time, this signal undoubtedly attracted the attention of many. This naturally included the experts of the ancient dynasty. But they might not be as relaxed as some people thought. Because of the relationship between Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhi, the ancient dynasty had a deeper relationship with Xianmen Tianzong, especially with Feng Tianya. On the surface, it seemed that the ascension of Xiao Yan's first disciple, Tang Jun, was more beneficial to the ancient dynasty. It would bring the two parties closer, and put more pressure on the Great Qin, Great Zhou, and other forces. But those with foresight could clearly see that the ascension of the strong and robust Tang Jun would not be beneficial to the ancient dynasty in the future in the Divine Land. If Yang Tai was Xiao Yan's disciple and ascended to the position of successor, the ancient dynasty might be happy. The somewhat confusing situation undoubtedly made the other forces, including the ancient dynasty, unable to see through the current situation. In Longevity City, Luo Qingwu smiled and sighed. How could there be so many calculations? It's just because Martial Nephew Tiansong is more outstanding and more suitable than Martial Nephew Tiantai. Zhu Yi in front of her did not mind at all when she said this, saying with a smile, "Our sect will not use the method of playing balance like the Taishu Temple did in the past, but Master's prestige, as well as our sect's current strength, has already determined that even if we do not have the will, we will still imperceptibly affect the judgment and thoughts of other people in the Divine Continent, and affect the overall situation of the Divine Continent. Eldest senior brother and Miss Jin are in love with each other, and should not be mixed with other external factors. But their union is destined to be seen by the outside world as a marriage alliance between our sect and the ancient dynasty. Unless Xianmen Tianzong explicitly denied it, the ancient dynasty's reputation would definitely rise after Xiao Yan's engagement. In the eyes of others, it would also become the force closest to Xianmen Tianzong. Even if the ancient dynasty did not express anything, other forces would unconsciously associate it with the power of Xianmen Tianzong when they faced it. Then, they would feel that it was difficult to fight against it. But when Tang Jun's matter came out, in some people's eyes, many different meanings could be seen, as if there was some kind of hint. Even the ancient dynasty would have some connections. And these things, just like Xiao Yan's engagement, could not be directly verified with Xianmen Tianzong. They could only guess, analyze, and interpret it themselves. But this kind of interpretation was not necessarily the same as Xianmen Tianzong's original intention. Yang Qing smiled bitterly and said, "To a certain extent, this dispels the pressure that eldest senior brother's marriage will bring to other forces. But does it make the matter between eldest senior brother and Miss Jin simpler or more complicated?" Wang Lin said faintly, "Miss Jin will definitely not misunderstand, and that is enough. Moreover, her father, Senior Gu, is not an ordinary person. He will most likely understand what is going on." Luo Qingwu shook her head and said, "There is also a mistake in calculating." The senior and junior brothers and sisters looked at each other and sighed together. For a moment, they did not know whether to laugh or cry. For them, it was obviously a very simple matter. Chapter 1370. Liang Qian looked at Yang Tai with a smile. "I haven't had the chance to congratulate you for reaching the Essence Soul Realm previously." Yang Tai also replied with a smile, "Your Majesty, you're exaggerating. Your Majesty is only one step away from breaking through. Your Essence Soul is in sight." At this time, Liang Qian was still at the late nascent soul stage. Although the Great Zhou dynasty had recovered in recent years, it was naturally far from its peak. With Yang Tai's current cultivation and status, although it was a bit excessive for the two of them to speak as equals, it was not too much. However, Yang Tai respected Liang Qian because Liang Qian had an extraordinary relationship with his master, Zhu Yi. The two of them had already gotten to know each other when Zhu Yi returned to the Great Zhou dynasty to take the imperial examination during the Golden Elixir period. When Zhu Yi lived in Tianjing City, Liang Qian took care of him. Previously, as the relationship between Xianmen Tianzong and the Great Zhou dynasty worsened, Liang Qian was in a difficult situation facing his father, Liang Pan. Although Liang Pan did not have the intention to make things difficult for him, it was inevitable that Liang Qian was boycotted and monitored in the Great Zhou dynasty at that time. After suffering for many years, when many families joined forces to attack Zhou and Liang Pan fled to Yingxi, Liang Qian finally saw the light. All these years, Liang Qian and Zhu Yi had never broken contact. As the emperor, he worked hard to govern, treated the people well, and was open-minded. He was also quite popular in the Great Zhou dynasty. Therefore, Yang Tai had always been very respectful towards Liang Qian, who was of the same generation as his master. Many times, he even treated him as a junior. The Essence Soul Realm is indeed not that easy to reach. Liang Qian smiled and shook his head. He was rather calm. When he inherited the throne, he was already at the late stage of yuanying. His cultivation level was even higher than Yang Tai's at that time. However, all these years, he had been stagnant, while Yang Tai had already soared to the sky and attained the primordial soul realm. The encounters he had had made him sigh. Xianmen Tianzong's superior Taoist technique resources and Yang Tai's outstanding aptitude and temperament were undoubtedly the main reasons, but they were not the only reason. Liang Qian himself was well aware of this. As the ruler of the Great Zhou dynasty, the resources he could mobilize were actually extremely abundant. Due to the uniqueness of ascending to the throne back then, Liang Qian was not suppressed by the Essence Soul Elders of the Great Zhou Empire even though his cultivation level was rather low. Because of Xianmen Tianzong, he was the most suitable candidate to be the Emperor of Zhou. Even if others wanted to make him a mere figurehead, they would have to think twice before doing so. Liang Qian himself wasn't a useless person, and he was very nimble. He quickly balanced the various powers in the imperial court and stabilized his position. Even though his words couldn't be said to carry enormous weight, he had the initiative in his grasp. Many experts of the Great Zhou dynasty who accepted him as the emperor simply gave him their full support, hoping that his cultivation level would become higher and higher. This would naturally be more and more beneficial to the Great Zhou Empire as a whole. Thus, as the Emperor of Zhou, Liang Qian did not lack resources at all. The Taoist techniques that he cultivated, the Tai Wang Dermic scriptures, were also extraordinary. He also had some scriptures from Buddhism and Heavenly Gate. More importantly, as the Emperor of Zhou, he cultivated imperial technique. With the blessing of the Dragon Vein Qi, he could achieve twice the results with half the effort. Even though his talent couldn't be compared to Yang Tai's, he wasn't mediocre either. It was just that the difficulty of the primordial soul realm far surpassed any previous bottleneck in the process of cultivation. Moreover, on the other hand, cultivating imperial techniques was a double-edged sword. There were pros and cons. With the Dragon Vein Qi, it was beneficial for cultivation. If one could continuously expand one's territory, it would be greatly beneficial to one's cultivation level. However, on the other hand, if one's overall strength was damaged or even reduced, losing one's territory, then for an emperor, cultivation would be like falling into a quagmire and stagnating. If one lost their country, the Dragon Vein Qi would be crippled and one's cultivation level might even regress. Over the past decade or so, the Great Zhou Empire had been facing pressure from the ancient empire. Even though they had been careful and didn't fall into chaos, they had also lost some territory. The emperor's reputation had also declined. This was like shackles that slowed down Liang Qian's progress to the primordial soul realm. Liang Qian looked at Yang Tai and sighed inwardly. The Xianmen Tianzong's direct lineage is indeed extraordinary. The difficulties in the eyes of others are so easy for them. However, looking at the calm and polite young man in front of him, Liang Qian couldn't help but smile inwardly. However, for the ancient empire, it's not something to be happy about that he fell behind in the competition with Tang Jun. As for Tang Jun's colder and more domineering style, Liang Qian wasn't worried. Even if the sky collapsed, the first to fall was not the Great Zhou Empire. Although the Great Zhou Empire had lofty ambitions and wanted to rise strongly, it would definitely be more difficult to face a more domineering leader like Xianmen Tianzong. However, for the current Great Zhou Empire, they had to be down to earth and steadily improve their own strength. Liang Qian believed that it wasn't just him. Emperor Qin Shi Zongtang, Bei Rong First Chanyu, as well as the leaders of the Heavenly Sword Sect, Songhai Sword Sect, Thunderbolt Sword Sect, and Reincarnation Sect were all happy to see this happen. Getting close to Xianmen Tianzong, following Xianmen Tianzong, or relying on Xianmen Tianzong didn't mean that they would give up on their own development. This wasn't contradictory. If Tang Jun really ascended to the throne in the future, the first people he had to consider were Taishu Temple, Mount Shu Sword Sect, the Ancient Dynasty, and even the demon race of Tianhuang Mainland. However, Liang Qian looked at Yang Tai and sighed in his heart. This kid's future is also limitless. Although his cultivation is slightly weaker than Zhou Yunsong and Han Yang, his talent and reputation surpass them. It's a pity that he met that Tang Jun. I wonder if this is the intentional arrangement of the Taoist sect master, Emperor Yan, and Master Yi? He sized up Yang Tai and saw that the latter's eyes were gentle and clear. He couldn't help but nod to himself. It doesn't matter if he's shrewd or if he really doesn't have any grudges. Anyway, his state of mind isn't messed up at all. It's really rare. After all, although it was still far from the end of the matter, Yang Tai might have missed out on a position that was more important than his, Liang Qian's, position as emperor. Based on the current trend, it was very likely that he would become the most powerful person in the human cultivation world of the Divine Land in the future. At this moment, on the other side, there were also people looking at Yang Tai. They were two women, one in green and the other in white. The woman in white looked at Yang Tai with a complicated gaze. There was nostalgia, doubt, uneasiness, and even some sadness. The green-clothed woman beside her tugged at the corner of her clothes. "Sister, I heard from father that he's at a disadvantage in the competition with Tao Master Vast Sky, Tang Jun." The woman in white pursed her lips. Maybe it has something to do with me. I've dragged him down." Hearing this, the woman in green had a bitter expression on her face. She looked at her sister, not knowing what to say. The woman in white was called Gu Qing. She was Xiao Zhen'er's nephew. After Xiao Zhen'er and Gu Lianqing, she was the most outstanding rising star of the ancient emperor's bloodline. In the past, she got to know Yang Tai and fell in love with him. As they got along, they gradually got closer, but there seemed to be a layer of distance between them. Although Yang Tai had never mentioned it, Gu Qing understood in her heart that it was because Yang Tai still remembered his lover from the past, the cultivator of the purple firmament path, true monarch Jade Domain, Fang Xiaolan. Although the two of them had been separated for a long time, Fang Xiaolan still had a place in Yang Tai's heart. The ancient emperor was naturally happy to see Gu Qing and Yang Tai become Tao companions. Tao companions were not necessarily husband and wife, but they would definitely accompany each other and help each other along the long path of cultivation. Yang Tai was at a disadvantage in the competition with Tang Jun. When this matter fell into the eyes of the ancient dynasty, it gave rise to other interpretations. Some people's hearts were heavy, thinking that this was a hidden expression of dissatisfaction from the celestial sect of wonders. The woman in green hesitated and said, "But Xianmen Tianzong has always let the matter between you and Yang Tai go. Could it be that because Ant Jin and Flame Emperor have officially established the marriage agreement, they misunderstood that we are placing our bets on both sides? That's why they are interfering with you and Yang Tai? I don't know. I only know that I don't have any thoughts about this. Whether Senior Marshal Brother Yang is the successor of Xianmen Tianzong or just an ordinary disciple, to me, it doesn't make any difference. Gu Qing looked at Yang Tai with a complicated gaze. The expressions of the two sisters suddenly changed, and they looked at their elder sister. Elder sister, do you think Yang Tai will completely draw a line between him and you in order to reclaim his lost territory and compete for the position of the next disciple of Sect Master? A hint of pain appeared in Gu Qing's eyes. He won't. Even if he wants to draw a line between him and you, it won't be to compete for the position of the next disciple of Sect Master, but because… She sighed softly and turned her head to look into the distance. There was a tall woman in purple standing there. The woman's gaze also fell on Yang Tai. Gu Qing recognized her. She was the disciple of the Purple Heaven Path, true monarch Bihuan, Fang Xiaolan. Fang Xiaolan's gaze stopped on Yang Tai for a moment before she retracted it and turned to leave. A long time after she left, Yang Tai ended his conversation with Liang Qian and watched as Liang Qian left with his entourage. Whether it was Fang Xiaolan or the Gu sisters, their cultivations were all lower than Yang Tai's. Even when Yang Tai was talking to Liang Qian, he could still sense their location and movement. His gaze turned to the place where Fang Xiaolan had disappeared and sighed softly. After that, he turned and walked towards Gu Qing. It's only been a few days since we last met, but your cultivation has improved again. Yang Tai smiled warmly. Gu Qing also smiled. At least I didn't waste my time. She turned to her younger sister and said, "Don't delay the welcoming ceremony. You go first, I'll be there soon." The green-robed woman glanced at Gu Qing with some worry, but after bidding farewell to Yang Tai, she turned and left. Yang Tai looked at Gu Qing and asked curiously, "Do you have something you want to ask me?" Gu Qing stared at him for a moment, then said softly, "Senior Apprentice Brother Yang, what do you think of our future?" Yang Tai was slightly startled, then his expression turned solemn. He looked at Gu Qing for a moment and seemed to understand what she was thinking. Slowly, he said, "Junior Apprentice Sister Gu, if you're referring to my sect, you don't have to worry. My sect is not keen on marriage alliances, but the elders will definitely not interfere with the matters of the younger generation's Tao companions as long as both parties are willing. I even have a grand disciple now. When I accepted a disciple, that's what my master taught me. When my disciples accepted disciples, I also taught them the same thing. Senior Apprentice Uncle and Tao Lord Qingyi are in the same situation." Chapter 1371. After Yang Tai spoke, a smile appeared on Gu Qing's face, but her gaze was still extremely heavy. She spoke in a light voice, "Senior Brother Yang, we have known each other for many years. I'm very clear of your character, and the matter I want to ask you has nothing to do with the profound sect. It only concerns you personally." Yang Tai didn't say anything. Silently, he looked at Gu Qing, waiting for her to finish. "What I want to ask is, what do you think of our future?" Gu Qing repeated her question. This time, Yang Tai fell silent and didn't answer. Gu Qing took a deep breath and said slowly, "Senior Brother Yang, although you've never mentioned it before, I know that you almost became Tao companions with the Purple Sky Path's perfected Lord Baihuan. It seems like it wasn't just Tao companions, but a couple like Aunt Jin'er and Emperor Yen?" Yang Tai nodded slowly and looked at Gu Qing calmly. "That's right." Gu Qing probed, "Was she the one who suggested the two of you separate?" Yang Tai smiled and replied calmly, "Yes, Sister Xiaolan has a strong personality and is very competitive. I'm giving her too much pressure." Upon hearing this, Gu Qing sighed inwardly. For most people, marrying a descendant of the celestial sect of wonders was 100 benefits and no harm. Nowadays, there were countless cultivators from all over the world who were fighting to the death for it. But for some people, the successor of Xianmen Tianzong was too dazzling, and he was getting more and more dazzling. Even Gu Qing herself, as the rising star of the royal bloodline of the ancient dynasty, after becoming Yang Tai's Dao companion, she could foresee that she would be completely enveloped by Yang Tai's radiance from now on. If they really got married, there would be no more perfected Lord Qing Yang, Gu Qing, but only Dao venerate Tian Tai's wife, Madame Yang. But compared to Feng Xiaolan, Gu Qing's personality was more gentle. She was trying hard to convince herself to accept this. Gu Qing looked at Yang Tai and asked in a soft voice, "Senior brother Yang, do you still miss her? I have no interest in investigating your past, your thoughts, and your private affairs. However, this matter is an exception because it also involves me." Gu Qing calmly replied, "No matter what your answer is, I can accept it. I won't be hysterical. No matter what decision you make, I can understand and face it calmly. I'm not a child. If there's really no hope, I can pick it up and let it go. I won't get entangled. But I have to do my best to fight for it. I have to understand that I cannot be muddle-headed." Yang Tai looked at Gu Qing before him. Slowly, he shook his head and said, "No, junior sister Gu, this is indeed something you have the right to know. After becoming acquainted with you, I've often thought about these things in my heart. Even if you didn't ask, I would have told you everything after I sorted out my thoughts." Hearing that, Gu Qing quietly listened to Yang Tai. Yang Tai looked up at the sky and said, "You're right. I've always been thinking about Sister Xiaolan. Back then, I did my best to persuade her to stay and fight for her, but she was determined. I could only respect her decision. Over the years, my cultivation has gradually increased, and I've experienced more and more things. I've gradually become indifferent to many things. Or rather, I can use a different mood to face things and look at things from a different angle. But in the end, I still can't let go of her." Yang Tai's expression was slightly sad, but he was still calm. "Junior sister Gu, you're very outstanding. You and Sister Xiaolan are both outstanding. Today I'll say something frivolous. If I can form a bond with you and be with you for the rest of my life, it will also be a blessing for me." Although Gu Qing admired Yang Tai was steady and polite. Frivolity was not fated with him. He never crossed the line, nor did he give any ambiguous hints that would cause Gu Qing to misunderstand. When he interacted with Gu Qing, whether it was him or his master, Xianmen Tianzong, they all saw her as a possible Dao companion. It was far from the point of marriage. Yang Tai looked at Gu Qing and said sincerely, "If we really reach that step in the future, it would be my fortune to be able to marry you. But my feelings for Sister Xiaolan and my feelings for you are ultimately different." Yang Tai looked at Gu Qing's bright eyes. Slowly, he said, "You're not anyone's substitute, nor are you anyone's backup. You're unique. If we really get together, I promise to be loyal to you. I won't even have anything to do with Sister Xiaolan. It's just that such a union would be for us to know each other and stay together, not love each other." When Gu Qing heard this, a relaxed and bitter smile appeared on her face. "That's right, I had this feeling from the very start. You've never acted out of line before. Even if I wanted to lie to myself, I couldn't. Although you say that, I know that between us, we will at most stop at the level of Dao companions. If not for the existence of true monarch Bihuan, we might still be fated to be husband and wife. But as you said, even if we're husband and wife, we're still husband and wife, not husband and wife who love each other. I just don't know, if not for that true monarch Bihuan, or if you and I met first, would our feelings be different?" Yang Tai paused for a moment, then continued, "Just now, you asked me how I see the future, but I haven't answered you yet. Because there are some things that I haven't thought through before, and I don't know how to tell you. But today, I realized that I still didn't understand you well enough. Junior sister Gu, you're far more outstanding than I knew. It's also because you've enlightened me that I've gradually become more resolute about the future." He looked at Gu Qing and said softly, "I'll go see Sister Xiaolan and talk to her one more time. Lying is a kind of harm, and so is rejection. But I still don't want to lie to you. If I've made you unhappy, I'm very sorry. But as a man, I have my own responsibilities. Actually, I'm already very ashamed that you were the one who asked first and not me. I've held you back these past few years." Gu Qing shook her head. "Senior brother Yang, you're too serious. If we're talking about holding you back, it's me who held you back. Because of my existence, you've been in a dilemma. All these years, discussing Tao with you, I've benefited a lot. Almost all of them were one-sided. And when it comes to karma, it's also my own wishful thinking." She raised her head and looked at Yang Tai. "I'm very happy that you can tell me everything clearly today. I'm really very happy." The white-clothed girl smiled. "Senior brother, I wish you and true monarch Bihuan can be reunited, and have a good ending." Yang Tai looked at Gu Qing's watery eyes and said softly, "Thank you for your blessings, junior sister Gu." Gu Qing smiled and said, "The seniors and fellow Taoists of the Purple Sky Path should be arranged in the guest house at the south of Longevity City. Senior brother Yang, go quickly." Seeing that she wasn't willing to turn and leave, Yang Tai nodded. "Junior sister Gu, take care." Gu Qing looked at Yang Tai's departing figure and the smile on her face gradually faded. Her eyes were covered with a layer of mist, and she couldn't suppress her sorrow. Yang Tai could clearly sense the fluctuations in her emotions. His gaze revealed traces of pity and pity. Feeling Yang Tai's footsteps gradually slow down, Gu Qing bit her lip. "Don't turn around, don't turn around. If you turn around, I'm afraid I won't be able to control myself and I'll cry in front of you." She couldn't suppress the sorrow in her heart, but Gu Qing only felt her body stiffen. She couldn't suppress it, and she only wanted to look at that purple-clothed youth one more time. Yang Tai's footsteps stopped. He didn't turn around and listened to her motionlessly. Tears finally flowed down Gu Qing's face, but she lowered her head and didn't make a sound. "Junior sister Gu, I'm sorry." Yang Tai sighed silently and took another step forward. This time, he directly broke through the void and disappeared instantly. "Since I can't give you a promise, the more gentleness I have now, the more hurt I'll be in the future." Maybe if he went to look for Fang Xiaolan, he would still run into a wall and return. However, he couldn't make Gu Qing wait for him because of this. That would be an insult to Gu Qing. In another area of Longevity City, Zhu Yi was currently conversing with Gu Qing, a Tao integration realm expert from the ancient royal dynasty. Their gazes were intentionally or unintentionally glancing in the same direction. After a glance, they retracted their gazes again. Gu Qing sighed and said, "Perhaps this is good for both sides." Zhu Yi said, "For such matters, as long as we let nature take its course, it's actually fine. Human feelings are the most delicate things. Although we can make do and slowly get along with each other, making do is a kind of helplessness and compromise in itself." Gu Qing didn't continue this topic. "I wonder when your master, the master of the Mystic Gate, will arrive?" Zhu Yi answered, "Master will arrive at the same time as eldest senior brother." Gu Qing nodded silently. The ancient royal dynasty actually had some uncertainties about Lin Feng's arrival, the gathering of his personal disciples, and the grand invitation of fellow Taoists from all over the world. This time, apart from the engagement of Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhen'er, there would also be a Dharma assembly for the younger disciples. Furthermore, there would also be a grand elixir conference jointly organized by Xianmen Tianzong and the ancient royal dynasty. Gu Jun, Gu Qing, and the others from the ancient royal dynasty were all aware of these matters. However, Lin Feng had informed them in advance that there were other matters to be discussed together. They didn't know the specific contents, so Gu Jun, Gu Qing, and the others kept guessing in their hearts. as the date approached, more and more people gathered in Lifelong City. Even Shi Tianhao, who was originally in the battlefield in the void, returned from Konghai the day before the ceremony, rushing to Lifelong City. However, what made others concerned was that the person who stirred up the storm back then, the youngest disciple of the Mystic Gates, Master Lin Feng, the controversial son of Yu Wang Tianhai, Grand Luo Yidu, had never appeared. Ever since the matter of entering the sect back then, the Zenith Heaven Immortal sect had never appeared again. There were cultivators who were familiar with the successor of the celestial sect of Xian men who asked about it indirectly. In the end, it turned out that none of the younger disciples of the celestial sect of Xian men had seen this ninth Uncle Master. However, after so many years, everyone gradually got used to it. If it wasn't for the fact that the personal disciples of the Mystic Gates Master had come out in full force, the crowd wouldn't have had any hope of seeing the true body of the ninth disciple of the Mystic Gates Master. Compared to Grand Luo, what was truly awkward was that the most important figures of the ceremony, Lin Feng and Xiao Yan, had not appeared until the day of the ceremony. Chapter 1372. The engagement did not necessarily require Lin Feng and Xiao Yan to be present, but now that the momentum had been raised, and they had made it clear before, it was a little awkward at this moment. The contemporary ancient Emperor Gu Jun looked at Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others. Wang Lin's expression did not change at all, while Zhu Yi nodded slightly at him, indicating that he should not be impatient. Gu Jun withdrew his gaze and looked to the other side. There stood a middle-aged man with his hands behind his back. He looked dignified, and his sword soared into the sky, like a pillar supporting the sky. In fact, among the people present at this moment, other than the curious Lin Feng and Xiao Yan who had not yet arrived, many people had their attention on this middle-aged man. This was because this man was the current sect leader of the Shushan sword sect, Ji Wenrui. His appearance here had truly exceeded the expectations of many people. Even the ancient imperial dynasty was stunned when they received the notification from the celestial sect of Wonders. Since the recent war between the two worlds, the Shushan sword sect had once again sealed their mountain. Not to mention the great sword cultivators of the primordial spirit realm, even the younger disciples had shut themselves in. During the war between the two worlds, although neither the Shushan sword sect nor Xianmen Tianzong made it public, the turmoil that broke out in Shushan because of Sword Venerable Firmament and the others was still noticed by others, causing many speculations. After all, at that time, the other 8 major sword sects of the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance had directly felt the strange changes in the Nine Heavens Taichu sword formation. Many people even brushed past death, and the sword formations of their respective sects were shaken and almost collapsed. The large amount of sword qi in the sword formations was almost exhausted. After the war, the 8 major sword sects all went to Shushan to ask for an explanation. In the end, there were many theories and speculations about how the Shushan sword sect calmed the situation, and the truth of the turmoil in Shushan was also faintly revealed in front of the world. The enmity between Xianmen Tianzong and the Shushan sword sect was deep. After this incident, their relationship was not said to be even more antagonistic, but it was also very awkward. Since then, the Mount Shu sword sect had kept an even lower profile. After the War of the Two Realms, following Lin Feng's sweeping of the demons with his sword and Luo Qingwu's primary spirit sword becoming famous throughout the world, even though the celestial sect of Xianmen itself was not a sect of the Way of the Sword, but in the cognition of the world, the title of the number 1 Holy Land of the Way of the Sword in the world had already gradually shifted to the celestial sect of Xianmen. When Han Yang, the second-generation first seat of the Qingwu Pavilion under the sword immortal monarch Luo Qingwu, attained the primordial divinity realm and established the third peerless sword Dao of Xianmen Tianzong, Luo Yuan's sword extermination, Xianmen Tianzong had become the destination for sword cultivators in the world. As for the Mount Shu Sword sect, its position became awkward, and it was gradually forgotten by the younger generation of cultivators. Today, when they suddenly saw Ji Wenrui, the sect master of the Mount Shu Sword sect, appear here, the other cultivators who came to watch the ceremony were all surprised and doubtful. Their intuition told them that this grand event convened by Xianmen Tianzong was even more extraordinary and had a greater impact than they had expected. When swordsman Tong Tian, swordsman Thunderous, swordsman Streaming Light, and other great sword cultivators saw Ji Wenrui appear, although their expressions did not change, their gazes were slightly serious. Unlike the others, Gu Jun, Gu Cheng, and the others all knew that Ji Wenrui appeared here because he was also invited by Xianmen Tianzong. And since Ji Wenrui was willing to come out of the mountain and go to Xianmen Tianzong, who had a relatively awkward relationship with him, perhaps he knew what Lin Feng wanted. But now that things had come to this, it was not good for them to directly ask Ji Wenrui. Fortunately, the ceremony was about to begin. When Lin Feng and Xiao Yan arrived, they would be able to solve the doubts in their hearts. But it was getting closer to noon, and Lin Feng and Xiao Yan still had not arrived. It was inevitable that they would have doubts in their hearts. At this moment, in the void far away from Longevity City, a crack suddenly appeared, and an extremely ferocious power spread out from it. In Longevity City, the group of experts led by Gu Jun all looked at the distant void. In the sky above the huge city there was a huge and mysterious spirit design operating. It was the South Pole Longevity design. The people of the ancient dynasty were very familiar with that ferocious aura. More than 20 years ago, when they were still in the ancient longevity world, they had once fought it at close range. Naturally, they were not unfamiliar with it at this moment, and they could immediately recognize that it was the ferocious will of the calamity of the Nether Sea. Although they did not think that the king of the underworld, who had disappeared for many years, would come to cause trouble at this moment, and they also knew that apart from the king of the underworld, Xiao Yan of Xianmen Tianzong and Wu Mingqi of Taishu Temple both had the ability to break open the crack in the Nether Sea, the South Pole Longevity design was still automatically activated, just in case. However, what happened next made everyone slightly stunned. Although they could see the calamities raging in the cracks of the Netherworld Sea, they did not violently pour down on the vast land of the Divine Prefecture. Although the Nether Sea had cracked open, there seemed to be an invisible barrier that held the calamity in place, preventing it from wantonly destroying it. The dim yellow springs True Water and the blood-red Blood River True Water flowed out from the crack. Although they were constantly purifying or polluting the surrounding spiritual qi, they were not in a mess. Instead, they were neatly intertwined, forming a path. On that path, the bluish-purple netherworld evil flame and the black mysterious heavenly tribulation flame burned, but they were like fierce beasts that were shackled, unable to destroy and devour without restraint. On the contrary, because of the existence of the netherworld evil flame and the mysterious heavenly tribulation flame, the Blood River True Water and the Yellow Springs True Water were frozen. The foul smell of the filthy blood was swallowed by the flames, leaving only a few wisps of faint green smoke. And the dim Yellow Springs Long River, which purified all things and made all things pale, was also restrained. Above the path, the extremely cold Nine Serenities wind, which looked like black rays of light, and the ferocious endless wind, which looked like red light mist, became gentle at this moment. They were like black silk ribbons and red auspicious clouds, contrasting against the path. Whether it was Gu Jun, Gu Cheng, or Ji Wenrui and Shi Zongtang, when they saw this scene, their pupils shrank slightly. It can actually make the tyrannical Nether Sea so calm? At the end of the road, 2 fire lotuses that occupied an area of more than 1,000 acres bloomed. They were dazzling, bright, and blazing, wiping away the darkness and suppression brought about by the calamity of the Nether Sea, illuminating the world. On the 2 fire lotuses stood 2 figures. They were the master of the celestial sect of wonders, Lin Feng, and his sect leader's disciple, the Flame Emperor, Xiao Yan. The two of them stood on the fire lotuses. The fire lotuses moved forward, burning the path formed by the calamity of the Nether Sea. The aura of disaster in the air was cleansed, and then the two fire lotuses gradually shrank, falling towards Eternal City. The crack in the distant Nether Sea closed, leaving not a trace, as if it had never existed. Looking at the fire lotus beneath Lin Feng's feet, Shi Zongtang and the others had some understanding. The rumors are true. The person refining the Nether Sea is not the master of the celestial sect of wonders, but his disciple, the Flame Emperor. At that thought, everyone looked at Xiao Yan in a different way. Although Xiao Yan had been moving around the world since he was young, no one had ever dared to look down on him. However, when they saw the scene of Xiao Yan stopping the Nether Sea disaster and descending into the world today, they were even more shocked. Ji Wenrui's eyes moved slightly when he saw that scene. Compared to the war between the two worlds back then, he's much more at ease. What level has he reached in refining the Nether Sea today? Everyone looked at the valiant young man in a purple robe in shock. When they turned to look at Lin Feng, who was in front of Xiao Yan, their hearts were in turmoil. The 3 mountains of Yingxi had fallen into Lin Feng's hands, and Lin Feng's 3 clones had been staying in Yingxi all these years. Those who had entered Yingxi previously could faintly feel that the current Yingxi was different from before after entering again in recent years. The faintly discernible feeling seemed unreal, but everyone believed that their feelings were not wrong. There were a total of 6 star sea gates, and 4 of them were in Lin Feng's hands. Although there were demons who could enter and exit the Star Sea, once Lin Feng discovered them, he could forcefully close the other party's Star Sea gate. The current desolate ancient Star Sea had become a paradise for humans. Not only did it produce a large number of resources, but Xianmen Tianzong also allowed other human cultivation forces to select outstanding talents to enter the Star Sea to cultivate. Now, the Nether Sea seemed to be falling into Xianmen Tianzong's control step by step. It was rumored that the spiritual sea was about to reopen, and Xianmen Tianzong was a strong competitor. All of these dazzled everyone. Although they knew that Xianmen Tianzong's current strength was already at the top of the entire Divine Land, the tip of the iceberg that he inadvertently showed still shocked everyone. They also realized that Xianmen Tianzong was still in a period of rapid growth, and his potential was still incomparably deep. Lin Feng looked at the group of cultivators in front of him, but he was thinking in his heart at the moment, "I'm late yet still making such a flashy appearance. Will I be asking for a beating?" He shook his head and eliminated the messy thoughts in his mind. He looked at the crowd with a smile and nodded his head in greeting. "Such an important ceremony, yet I and my disciple are late. I've made everyone wait for a long time. It's really rude of me. I hope everyone can forgive me." Gu Jun and the others hurriedly returned the greeting. "Master of the Mystic Gate, you're too kind." Xiao Yan also took a step forward, cupping his fists and saluting. "Some accidents happened while I was in seclusion, thus delaying my seclusion time. I've made my master worry and seniors and fellow Taoists wait for a long time, please forgive me." Gu Jun smiled. "It's all right. Although we cultivators are very sensitive to time, accidents happen during the process of cultivation. It's normal." Gu Qing looked at the sky and also smiled. "It's noon soon. The ceremony can be held as scheduled." Lin Feng and Xiao Yan were immediately led to their seats by Gu Qing, and the host of the ceremony was handed over to the local landlord. Gu Jun sat on the main seat, while Gu Qing was responsible for hosting the ceremony. Other than the following matters such as the exchange of spells and elixir gathering, this engagement was equivalent to Lin Feng personally paying a visit to his eldest disciple. Even if he had other matters to attend to, Lin Feng personally came to propose marriage. This was enough for any force in the world to solemnly respond. Moreover, whether it was Gu Jun or the entire ancient dynasty, they all valued Xiao Zhen very much and cared for her. Naturally, they would not neglect the etiquette. Therefore, the entire ceremony was extremely grand. Of course, Lin Feng would not bring the betrothal gift with him. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others who had arrived earlier would bring it. It was just that now that the ceremony had begun, it was officially entrusted to them. As for Lin Feng's betrothal gift for his eldest disciple, it was even more impossible for it to be shabby. Chapter 1373. One of the most precious resources in the desolate ancient star ocean was the 100 heavenly spirit star bead. Each heavenly spirit star bead required thousands or even tens of thousands of years to nurture. When a cultivator carried a star bead with him or refined it into a magical treasure or artifact, it could produce a transformation effect and make it more convenient to gather spiritual qi. Among the materials that could assist in cultivation, it was the best choice. One of the most precious resources in the star ocean was the star ocean heavenly sand. Although it didn't seem like a lot, it was a great material for refining treasures. It was especially suitable for refining cauldrons, and other magical artifacts. It could improve the quality of the heavenly sand. In the process of refining elixirs, directly adding it as an aid could greatly increase the success rate of refining elixirs. Before the Divine Land, the only way to gather so much starry heavenly sand at once could be traced back to ancient times, when the human sovereign occupied the Sea of Stars. But even then, the value of such a large amount of starry heavenly sand was astronomical. With the current scale of the ancient royal dynasty, the starry heavenly sand in front of them could be distributed to every descendant of the ancient royal dynasty. Apart from the heavenly spirit star bead and the star sea heavenly sand, there were even more precious items. They were the most precious products of the desolate ancient star sea, 10 star remains from the star tomb. Although star remains were more valuable to the demon race, they were also of great help to human cultivators. Taking a step back, although the Divine Land and Infinite Wasteland were enemies, they had not completely cut off contact with each other. Even if the ancient dynasty did not use these 10 star remains, they could still exchange them for great benefits from Infinite Wasteland, far greater than what they had paid. Furthermore, there was no market for them, and the demon race would fight for them. Although the other sects, including the ancient imperial dynasty, could also enter the star sea with the permission of the celestial sect of wonders, in terms of gathering resources, how could they compare to the celestial sect of wonders, who had 4 star sea gates in their hands? And these were only the products of the star ocean. Apart from the treasures in the star ocean, there were even more treasures from the Ing Ocean, such as the condensed crystal and the purple condensed dew. This was especially true for a Scene Pearl. It was priceless, and it moved Shi Zongtong, Ji Wenrui, Sword Sovereign Skirich, and the others. This was a precious treasure from the Ing Ocean. In the long history of the heaven primordial world, it was known to have appeared less than 10 times. It could help Tao integration stage cultivators challenge the heavenly deterioration tribulation. It was common knowledge that no matter if it was an expert at the Tao integration realm or the last days realm, the most difficult and dangerous part of charging towards a higher realm was always the first tribulation. Only by surviving the first tribulation would one be considered to have entered the first tribulation stage, or perhaps the middle tribulation stage. Only then would one have a future. If one couldn't survive, they would die on the spot and no one could save them. For cultivators, the most dangerous thing was that before taking the first step, almost no one could truly have a clear idea of what to do and be completely confident about it. Everyone had to take a certain amount of risk, which required great courage and determination. At such a time, they naturally had to try their best to increase their confidence and the possibility of success. No matter how carefully they planned, it was never too much. Otherwise, if they were careless, all their glory, long lives, and powerful strength would all turn into ashes. In the current Divine Land, although there were a limited number of experts at the Tao integration stage, there was no lack of experts with profound cultivation. They had been at the void return or Tao integration stage for many years, but there were still very few who had truly taken that step. In the history of the Divine Land, there was definitely no one who died when a Tao integration stage expert challenged the first tribulation. As for experts at the last days realm challenging the middle tribulation and the collapse of the great Tao, it was even more difficult and dangerous. The great sage, the Kunlun dragon king, the great phoenix sage, and so on, which one of them wasn't a great demon in the last days realm? Shoichi Dashin, Tao Master Qing Yi, and Sword Sovereign Tiangang had been in the last days realm for many years, but they still couldn't take that step. After the ancient clan retreated to the ancient longevity world, an ancestor in the last days realm failed to challenge the middle tribulation and died. Although the image pearl was of no help for cultivators in the last days realm challenging the middle tribulation, it was of great help for cultivators in the Tao integration stage challenging the first tribulation. Although the key still lay in oneself, one could never be too careful when it came to going through tribulations. Looking at the image pearl, the eyes of all the Tao integration stage cultivators present, including Gu Yuankai and Gu Qing, flickered slightly. This included the experts who had just reached the Tao integration stage, such as Sword Sovereign Tong Tian, Great Chanyu Bei Rong, Thunderous Sword Sovereign, and Vast Sea Sword Sovereign. Preparing for a rainy day and continuing to prepare had always started as soon as possible. However, some people had more thoughts in their hearts. Although everyone knows that Xianmen Tianzong's complete control of the Ying Sea will make their strength soar, it's only at this moment that a corner of the iceberg has been revealed. We have the most intuitive understanding. Xianmen Tianzong has obtained at least one or two of these image pearls recently. Xianmen Tianzong has a Tao integration stage guest elder, Blazing Sun Tao Master Zhuge Zhuge, and a Star Soul Unification stage guest elder, Lu Yuan. The continuous extravagance made everyone dizzy. Next, there were many rare treasures in Xianmen Tianzong's betrothal gifts, including many Dharma treasure embryos. Later, when Duanmu Hong, the disciple of Shao Yen Fun Tianya, came forward with a few gourds, the others immediately perked up. Those were obviously medicine gourds, and the things inside were obviously elixirs. The ancient royal dynasty was famous for elixir refinement. Since Xianmen Tianzong used elixirs as betrothal gifts, they naturally had to be the best elixirs. Otherwise, he would inevitably become a laughing stock. In fact, many years ago, Flame Emperor Shao Yan had already proved that he was the best elixir refiner in the Divine Land, better than Tao Master Qing Ning of the Taishu Temple and Tao Master Spiritual Awareness Gu Yuan of the ancient royal dynasty. It was rumored that his master was the master of the Celestial Gate, Lin Feng, and his attainments in elixir refinement were above his eldest disciple. However, the master of the Celestial Gate almost never opened the furnace, so he could only exist in the legends. In addition to Shao Yan, his junior brothers, Zhu Yi and Yang Qing, were also the top figures in the Divine Land in the Tao of elixir refinement. Even their disciples and successors, such as Tang Jun, Duanmu Hong, Yang Tai, Yixin Hui, Yixin Xuan, and the others, were also famous for their elixir refinement abilities. This made the audience naturally look forward to the elixirs that Xianmen Tianzong had hired. Duanmu Hong was tall and handsome. Now, he had also grown from the weak youth of the past into an adult. Unlike his master Tang Jun, Duanmu Hong had a gentle temperament and was courteous. Although he was not aggressive, as the third-generation head disciple of Fun Tianya of Celestial Sect of Xianmen, the name of Lord Yuanmi had long spread in the vast land of the Divine Land. Together with Yixin Hui, the third-generation head disciple of Qian Tian Palace, and Lu Yilin, the third-generation head disciple of Nirvana Wonderland, he was listed as the successor who was best at alchemy among the third-generation head disciple of Xianmen's Celestial Sect. Duanmu Hong was the first to offer the first gourd. After the people of the ancient royal dynasty received it, their expressions changed slightly. Heaven's Spirit Replenishing Elixir. As Xianmen Tianzong's prestige and influence grew, all the experts, be it in the Divine Land or Infinite Mainland, focused their attention on Xianmen Tianzong. They carefully observed and analyzed every little change in the internal affairs of Xianmen Tianzong. Any information that came out of Xianmen Tianzong, even if it was just a word or two, would similarly attract the attention of many parties, regardless of whether it was useful or not. Today, with their strength and status, Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong did not care about some non-core information being known by others. The names and effects of elixirs such as the Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixir, the 33 Heavens Fortune Elixir, and the Golden Elixir gradually spread like wildfire and became widely known. Although they did not quantify the effects of the Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixir with numbers like Lin Feng, most of the people present had heard of the Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixir and knew that this elixir could actually enhance a cultivator's foundation. Such a powerful and precious elixir was naturally desired by many people, even if it had its limits. The encounter of Wang Lin, the third disciple of Lin Feng, the master of the Celestial Sect, back then had become a widely spread legend in the Divine Land, encouraging everyone who did not have an outstanding foundation to embark on the path of cultivation. The other human cultivation forces in the Divine Land had also begun to examine whether their previous standards of disciple recruitment were biased, resulting in many lost pearls in the ocean. Apart from foundation, it was difficult to test other qualities in advance. However, there was no doubt that the existence of the Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixir could avoid this problem to a certain extent. At the same time, if a disciple really had potential in terms of comprehension and willpower, the Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixir could also make up for the shortcomings of their foundation and improve to a higher level. As a force that had always been on good terms with Xianmen Tianzong, the ancient dynasty had been paying attention to the way they trained their disciples over the years. This time, Xianmen Tianzong used the Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixir as a congratulatory gift, which was undoubtedly good news for many young disciples with ordinary foundation but outstanding potential. At the same time, it would also increase the number of talents in the ancient dynasty. There were a total of 36 Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixirs that matched the number of Celestial Spirit. It could be said that it was an extremely large number. However, this was just the beginning. After the Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixir, there were 36 more elixirs. There were a total of 3 types of elixirs, each with 12 elixirs. The number of elixirs made everyone's eyes widen. Needless to say, there were 12 life-substituting elixirs. It was effective once in a person's lifetime. For 12 people to take it, in most cases, it was equivalent to having an extra life. This elixir was originally kept by the Taishu Temple, but the recipe had been lost. Now that there were so many life-substituting elixirs, the crowd could not help but guess that Xianmen Tianzong had already mastered the recipe of the life-substituting elixir. The appearance of 12 life-substituting elixirs at the same time undoubtedly shocked the crowd. Along with the life-substituting elixirs, there were also 12 Dark Sky Golden Elixir and 12 33 Days Fortune Elixir. These 2 elixirs made the hands of the cultivators from the ancient dynasty who were in charge of receiving the gifts burn. Whether it was the Dark Sky Golden Elixir or the 33 Days Fortune Elixir, they were all secret techniques of Xianmen Tianzong. Only Xianmen Tianzong possessed them. Their nature-defying effects had long been spread throughout the Divine Land. The former was beneficial for cultivators to gain enlightenment. If a foundation establishment cultivator were to consume it, there was a high chance that they could increase the grade of their beer. The latter also contained many great daos of heaven and earth. It was beneficial for cultivators to understand the mysteries of daos. If a cultivator below the advanced stage of yuanying consumed it, their cultivation would directly increase by 1 level. If a cultivator in the advanced stage of yuanying consumed it, it would greatly help in breaking through to the primordial soul stage. With such nature-defying effects, If any of the two elixirs were to enter China, it would cause a great stir. Chapter 1374. Ding of Shenzhou. Yinghai. Xinghai Gu Cheng and Gu Yuankai looked at each other and nodded. When Lin Feng visited the ancient longevity world for the first time, he gave the formula of the Supreme Treasure Wisdom Pill as a greeting gift. That wasn't even considered as a betrothal gift today. Without the ginseng fruit, he naturally couldn't refine the Supreme Treasure Wisdom Pill. However, for the ancient longevity world back then, the pill formula was immeasurable in other aspects and was even more useful than the pill formula itself. Compared to the astonishment of the others, the ancient emperor's emotions were much calmer. Their attainments in alchemy were undoubtedly much higher than those of other forces. They also had more dealings with Xianmen Tianzong in terms of alchemy and had a deeper understanding of Xianmen Tianzong's terrifying production in this aspect. In the ancient era, the ancient emperor had once ruled over the divine land and was also a top alchemist. During that era, the human emperor had also occupied the Xinghai. Be it Xia Huang or the ancient emperor himself, they had both refined a large number of top-notch medicines. Although the current Xianmen Tianzong didn't rule over the divine land, they naturally wouldn't be excluded from the exchange of resources in the divine land. They could easily obtain everything they wanted. In the previous war between the two worlds, the human race had achieved great results. Their sphere of influence had expanded into Tianhuang mainland and occupied many medium-class worlds and foreign dimensions previously controlled by the demon race. As the leader of the counterattack, Xianmen Tianzong had also gained a lot. The Yinghai, which had always been a mysterious and dangerous place in the past, had now completely fallen into Xianmen Tianzong's control. The rich resources in it were a huge treasure trove. Although the Yinghai was full of disasters and the Xian Sea was guarded by the dragon race, everyone could enter and leave the empty sea freely. This naturally included Xianmen Tianzong. From a certain point of view, the resources that Xianmen Tianzong could mobilize had already reached a new peak in the history of the human cultivation world in the divine land. And these raw materials fell into the hands of Shao Yan and the others who were good at alchemy. With the support of Ding of Shenzhou, they could maximize their own use. Although Sword Master Tong Tian and the others had long known that Xianmen Tianzong treated his disciples generously, they only realized today that they had underestimated Xianmen Tianzong. He had always known that Xianmen Tianzong's current wealth was so rich that he could no longer look at it in the past. However, at this moment, he had the most intuitive understanding. In the war between the two realms, starting from the master of the celestial sect of wonders, Lin Feng, his personal disciples, Shao Yan, Zhu Yi and the others, and even the second-generation direct disciples, Tang Jun, Yang Tai, Han Yang, Zhou Yunsong, Dao Yuding, and even the third-generation direct disciples, such as Lian Huazhao, Meng Honglu, and Chen Fanga, let everyone know how powerful Xianmen Tianzong was. After that, the war against the great Zhou dynasty once again confirmed this point. Now, everyone present deeply felt that not only in terms of combat power, but also in terms of the accumulation of resources, Xianmen Tianzong was also worthy of being the number one holy land in the divine land. Now that it was Lin Feng's first disciple, Shao Yan, who was engaged, the meaning was even more extraordinary, and the betrothal gifts were especially generous. However, although for Xianmen Tianzong, they didn't even blink when they gave such a generous betrothal gift, the ancient dynasty couldn't take it lightly. For the ancient dynasty, this was undoubtedly a heavy gift. It was so heavy that Gu Jun and the others had already begun to modify the original dowry list in their hearts. Although Lin Feng, Shao Yan, or even Zhu Yi and the others didn't care whether Shao Zhen'er had a dowry or not, the ancient dynasty couldn't ignore it. The ancient dynasty's national power naturally couldn't be compared with Xianmen Tianzong's family wealth. No one would ask them to return the dowry with the same amount as Xianmen Tianzong's betrothal gift, but if the difference was too great, It would undoubtedly be a matter of shame for the entire ancient dynasty. Gu Qing turned to Gu Yuankai. Ninth uncle, although we don't know when Zhen and the others will officially get married and send off the bride, we still need to prepare as soon as possible. When the time comes, I'll have to trouble you to open the cauldron and ensure the quality of the pills. Gu Yuankai nodded and said, "Of course. The lotus pill is only useful for our own people who cultivate the primordial way of longevity, so we should prioritize the longevity pill first. Xianmen Tianzong's disciples are all extremely talented, so they most likely won't be able to use it, but it's definitely not a problem to use it to exchange for resources with other forces, or their disciples' family members who consume it can greatly extend their lifespan." Gu Yuankai looked at the gourd in Duanmu Hong's hand and narrowed his eyes. "We need to increase the number of longevity pills to at least 24. We also need to increase the number of other pills." He paused for a moment. "That's not right, the number needs to be increased. For things like the sight pearl, star remains, star sea heavenly sand, and purple dew, the number of treasures of the same value that we can find will inevitably be slightly lacking." "That's right, we'll ask His Majesty before confirming the specific number." Gu Qing nodded, then suddenly sighed and said, "Actually, compared to the 33 Heavens Fortune Celestial Pill and the Mysterious Sky Many Wonders Golden Elixir, the Life Substitution Heaven Pill was the one that gave me a shock. Although those two kinds of medicinal pills are miraculous and extremely rare, that is only to the outside world. To the celestial sect of Xian itself, it is a lot more abundant. After all, the pill formula is their own and they also have the divine continent cauldron. As long as they can gather all the ingredients, they can open the furnace to refine pills. With Xiao Yan's attainments in the way of alchemy, he will not fail no matter what. But the life substitution heaven pill is different. It looks like Xianmen Tianzong has already restored the pill recipe. This is truly unexpected and admirable." Gu Yuankai nodded at the side. Back then, they had obtained the remnant recipe of the life substitution heaven pill. After deciding to lean towards Xianmen Tianzong, they had also provided the remnant recipe to Xianmen Tianzong. Over the years, the alchemy masters of the ancient royal court, led by Gu Yuankai, had also been diligently researching the remnant recipe of the life substitution heaven pill, seeking to restore it, and they had made some progress. But now, it seemed that Xianmen Tianzong had already successfully derived the complete pill recipe. After all, during the longevity ancient world pill gathering, the number of life replacement heavenly pills that the Taishu Temple had lost to the celestial sect of Xian Gate was only 3. Moreover, it was known that at least one of them had already been used up in the war between the two worlds. "It is very likely that the Master of the Celestial Gate has personally taken action," Gu Yuankai said softly. Gu Yuankai said softly, "In recent years, I've been exchanging alchemy with Xiao Yan. Although his attainments in this path have become increasingly profound, he should still be unable to restore the pill formula of the life-substituting heavenly pill in such a short time." Gu Qing looked at Lin Feng and nodded slowly. "The Master of the Celestial Gate is truly a peerless man." The current Emperor of Zhou, Liang Qian, laughed bitterly and turned to look at King Yen Liang, Liang Fu. "King Yen Liang, do I have an unmarried sister of the right age?" Liang Fu could not help but smile. "Your Majesty must be joking." Liang Qian shook his head. "Of course I'm joking, but I can't bring myself to laugh. Although the great Zhou dynasty was not as powerful as before, it would definitely not betray its daughter. If a disciple of Xianmen Tianzong was really betrothed, the great Zhou dynasty would definitely prepare a dowry of sufficient weight. However, with such a relationship, the relationship between Xianmen Tianzong and the great Zhou dynasty would definitely be closer." Taking 10,000 steps back, even if the celestial sect of Xian still did not interfere in the conflict between the great Zhou dynasty and the other powers, at the very least, when the Great Zhou dynasty was on the brink of life and death, they might be able to help the Great Zhou dynasty. At the very least, they would be able to preserve a few of their descendants. Liang Fu and Liang Qian had always had a good relationship. Back when Liang Pan treated Liang Qian coldly, Liang Fu had also taken care of him. After Liang Qian ascended to the throne, Liang Fu was also put in an important position. The Mahayana-grade magic treasure, the border-opening ship, had also chosen Liang Fu as its master under Liang Qian's persuasion. Your Majesty, the position of the main concubine in the harem is still vacant. Liang Fu smiled and transmitted his voice. Liang Qian was so angry that he laughed. Uncle Yen Liang, are you making fun of me? Liang Fu sighed softly. I don't dare. Liang Qian also stopped smiling and said indifferently, I understand what Uncle Yen Liang means, but a story like Emperor Yen and Lord Qingyi is something that can only be encountered by chance. Martial Immortal Lord and Sword Immortal Lord are both focused on attaining the Supreme Great Tao. Liang Fu nodded in agreement. Moreover, they do not need the support of Tao companions. Even if they become Tao companions, they will most likely support each other. In this way, if they do not know each other well, I'm afraid they will not choose Tao companions, let alone become husband and wife. He paused for a moment and looked at Liang Qian hesitantly. Liang Qian seemed to know what he was thinking and smiled. Xianmen Tianzong is powerful. If there are no major accidents, with the passage of time, its momentum will continue to grow. Even if I take a step back and ask for the second generation Xianmen Tianzong, it will not be a disgrace to the country. Hearing this, Liang Fu did not say anything. Even if it seemed like it was a disgrace to the Great Zhou Empire, it was not a big deal. Back when the Great Zhou Empire had yet to rise up, it was just a small kingdom by the border of Great Qin. But later, the Great Zhou dynasty grasped the opportunity and grew into a prosperous dynasty that was separated from the Great Qin dynasty. Who could predict what would happen in the future? What was important was the present. Only by grasping the present could one seek the future. Liang Qian also turned to look at Liang Fu. But for the second generation Xianmen Tianzong, how is their situation different from Martial Immortal Lord and Sword Immortal Lord? Liang Fu nodded silently. The others were shocked by the generosity of the celestial sect of Xianmen, as well as the deep and bottomless reserves hidden behind it. The people of the ancient imperial dynasty were thinking about how to return the gift. As the person who caused this wave, Lin Feng smiled calmly and said, I've made a fool of myself in front of fellow Gu and fellow Taoists. This last betrothal gift will be personally presented by my disciple. Everyone at the scene, including Gu Jun, was slightly shocked. There were so many treasures in front of them, but it was still not everything? There was still one last thing? How precious would this item be? Everyone's eyes could not help but look at Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan opened his palm, a cluster of golden flames condensed in the center of his palm, flickering with red and blue colors. Isn't this the Nanming Li fire? The ancient dynasty has the Li fire god technique. The people were not disappointed. Instead, they were even more curious. Chapter 1375. The foundation of the ancient emperor's lineage was the primordial way of longevity. It deduced the true meaning of longevity, boundless, endless, and full of vitality. However, just like the primordial demon sect's supreme scripture was the primordial demon scripture, which included the Avicii scripture and other branches, the primordial way of longevity was also all-encompassing. One of the branches was called the Li Fire God Technique. With the help of a fire seed, one could cultivate one of the 7 great true fires in the world, Nanming Li Fire. The Nanming Li Fire was undoubtedly incisive when used in fights of magical powers, but another well-known and unique use was that it was the most suitable firepower for refining pills and refining weapons. Since the ancient emperor, the ancient clan had always controlled Nanming Li Fire, and they were famous for alchemy and crafting. Of the 7 great true fires in the world, Xianmen Tianzong had all of them. Lin Feng's first disciple, the master of Fun Tian Cliff, Yan Emperor Shaoyan, was famous for controlling many kinds of true fires. True fire was one of the most explosive forces in the world. When they were in the same furnace, there would be no sympathy at all, and they would only fight to the death. Xiao Yan was the only one in the world who could control several types of true fires at the same time. Even the disciples of Fun Tian Cliff could cultivate more than one type of true fire at the same time by practicing his burning sky technique, but they all had their limit. So far, there was no one like Xiao Yan, who could gather all the true fires in one body. Nan Mingli fire was one of the 3 true fires that Xiao Yan had mastered the earliest. Xiao Yan is an expert in both pill refinement and weapon refinement. Even if he didn't have the Nan Mingli fire, his pill refinement skills would still be able to suppress the entire divine continent, being hailed as the #1 divine hand of the current generation. But the Nan Mingli fire still played an indelible role in the process of his growth in studying the path of pill refinement. Furthermore, he was also the strongest among the direct disciples of the Mystic Gates sect Master Lin Feng in the Tao of artifact refinement. The Nan Mingli fire was even more so. Tracing back to the source, Xianmen Tianzong and Xiao Yan obtained the Nan Mingli fire because Xiao Zhener secretly passed the Nan Mingli fire seed and the ancient emperor's Li fire divine art to Xiao Yan. Because the Li fire god technique was a Tao technique of the ancient emperor, Xiao Yan combined it with the burning sky technique and analyzed the Nan Mingli fire. He created a Tao technique of the Nan Ming proper technique and taught it to his disciples. Whether it was the Nan Ming proper technique or the Li fire divine technique, they could all be used to cultivate the Nan Mingli fire. At this moment, Xiao Yan opened his palm and revealed the Nan Mingli fire. The onlookers were confused. However, as the cultivators of the ancient dynasty stared at the flickering red and blue light and the bouncing golden flames, their faces gradually changed. First, it was the current ancient emperor Gu Jun. Then, Gu Yuankai and Gu Qing also saw the problem. Next, the eyes of Gu Peng and the other essence soul powerhouses of the ancient dynasty lit up. Everyone looked at each other. Gu Peng looked at Gu Yuankai and Gu Qing hesitantly. Xiao Yan used this Nan Mingli fire to develop a Tao technique, but it's not Xianmen Tianzong's Nan Ming proper technique. It's more like our dynasty's Li fire god technique, but it's not the same? Gu Yuankai took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. It's different. It's more profound than our dynasty's Li fire god technique. Gu Peng and the others trembled slightly. They could vaguely feel it, but they couldn't be completely sure just by watching. At this moment, hearing Gu Yuankai's words confirmed their guesses, they couldn't help but be even more shocked. Gu Qing felt the power of the flames and nodded. Ninth Imperial Uncle is right. Compared to our dynasty's original Li fire god technique, it's a step further. Gu Peng murmured, "This gift is really indescribable." The ancient emperor's inheritance was relatively complete. From ancient times until now, over the long years, the clan could be said to have produced many powerful cultivators. The various techniques in the primordial great way of longevity, including the Li fire god technique, were naturally refined and perfected by generations of powerful cultivators of the ancient emperor. The flaws that could be made up for had been made up for, and the possibilities for improvement had also been improved. At this point, if one wanted to advance further, it would undoubtedly be much more difficult. Moreover, the further one advanced, the more difficult it would be. Every little bit of improvement was precious. And now, the Li fire god technique, evolved from the Nan Ming Li fire in Xiao Yan's palm, was undoubtedly an improvement on the original Tao technique of the ancient emperor's inheritance. The weight of it was self-evident. If it's just the Li fire god technique, then it's fine. Gu Qing glanced at Gu Peng and said telepathically, "The key is the primordial great way of longevity. Hearing this, Gu Peng's body shook again. If it wasn't for the fact that he was also a powerful cultivator of the void return level, his body might even be trembling uncontrollably. Xiao Zhener only taught Xiao Yan the leaf fire god technique, and the primordial great way of longevity did not leak out. But Gu Qing, Gu Peng, and the others all knew that Xianmen Tianzong had the ancient heavenly gates Grand Jiutian divine sword Dao inheritance. At the same time, one of the ancient heavenly gates' 9 treasures, the Tsangtian Dao Jian, was currently in Xianmen Tianzong. And in the Grand Jiutian divine sword, the sword intent of the Dongfang Tsangtian sword was the sword intent of the ancient emperor's inheritance, and it was also the sword Dao that comprehended the primordial great way of longevity. Although it was different from the primordial great way of longevity, it pointed to the same Dao. Xianmen Tianzong might not be able to deduce the primordial great way of longevity with the sword intent of the Dongfang Tsangtian sword, but it was not impossible to touch the Dao of the same origin. Gu Qing, Gu Peng, and the others thought about the karma debate in the past. Gu Peng calmed himself down and frowned. He then asked, "But we didn't feel the Dao feedback when we were cultivating." Gu Qing said slowly, "This is Xianmen Tianzong's thoughtfulness. Today's Kali Fire God technique is just a prelude to ask for our own opinion. If we want them to help us deduce and improve the primordial great way of longevity, then they will help us. They might not even need us to provide the original version of the primordial great way of longevity. And improving the primordial great way of longevity is the most important gift on Xianmen Tianzong's list of betrothal gifts. If we are unwilling, then they naturally won't force us, but their intentions are still there." Gu Peng looked at Lin Feng, who was sitting there silently and calmly. Then, he looked at the Nanming Li fire in Xiao Yan's hand. The Li fire god technique is different from the primordial great way of longevity after all. The latter is much more profound. Can Xianmen Tianzong? At this point, Gu Peng gradually could not continue because he recalled the karma debate. Gu Peng could not help but sigh. This is really generous. Gu Qing also nodded. That's right. This is indeed generous. If it were any other betrothal gifts, the ancient dynasty could still think of a way to return the favor. However, this betrothal gift was simply too important. The overall improvement of the primordial great way of longevity would not only benefit the cultivators of the ancient dynasty, including Gu Jun. Even the longevity lotus seat of creation might benefit. Gu Peng and the others, even Gu Qing and Gu Yuankai, would benefit. When one reached the realm of Gu Jun and the longevity lotus seat, it was destined to become increasingly difficult to improve. Any gains would be extremely precious. While the ancient dynasty was moved by this generous gift, they also felt that it was a hot potato. In comparison, the awkwardness of relying on others to improve their Dao techniques was insignificant. Gu Peng had a slightly strange expression. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Xianmen Tianzong, are you trying to make us believe that we are selling our daughters?" Gu Qing scolded jokingly. "How can you make up your own niece like this?" The big shots of the ancient clan felt a mixture of pain and happiness at the moment. As for the cultivators of the other forces who were watching the ceremony, they were still somewhat confused. The sect master of the Mount Shu Sword sect, Ji Wenrui, and the sect master of the Purple Cloud Dao sect, Dao Master Thundercloud, were slightly moved. They stared at the Nanming Li fire in Xiao Yan's palm and fell into deep thought. Both of their sects had been passed down since ancient times. They had experienced the era when the ancient emperor ruled the divine land, so they knew more about the ancient emperor's orthodoxy than others. There were a large number of ancient books in their sections. However, they naturally could not clearly distinguish the mystery of the fire god technique deduced by the Nanming Li fire in Xiao Yan's palm like the experts of the ancient dynasty. However, they could vaguely see that Xiao Yan was not simply displaying the Nanming Li fire, but was using the true fire to deduce the secret art. At this time, It was naturally impossible to ask Gu Jun and the others to give advice and comment on such a secret art. Thinking of this, Jiwen Rui and Dao Master Thundercloud also thought of the karma discussion in the past. Their expressions suddenly became interesting. And at this time, Xiao Yan bowed towards the people of the ancient imperial dynasty, saying with a smile, "I cultivated the Nanmingli fire back then and benefited from your clan. Now that I've made some progress, take it as a token of my appreciation, please don't laugh at me." Hearing this, the others gradually reacted at this moment. For a moment they were all shocked. They looked at Xiao Yan and Lin Feng, the master of the Celestial Sect of Wonders, who was sitting there. More and more people began to gradually associate the fire god technique with the ancient way of longevity. Then, they gradually thought of their own Tao art. For a moment, everyone's mood became complicated. They were hesitant, and yearning. After the previous karma discussion, the other sects in the Divine Land were in chaos for a while. They all had different opinions and were uncertain. Since then, nothing similar happened. As time passed, although no one forgot it, the impact gradually settled. However, this settlement would not dissipate. Even the slightest movement would cause waves again. And now, another example was likely to appear in front of them, which made it difficult for them to calm down. Everyone hoped that their Tao art could reach a higher level and break through the shackles of the past. If others improved and they stayed where they were, it would be equivalent to regressing. At this time Lin Feng looked towards Gu Jun, smiling unhurriedly saying, "I've let fellow Taoist Gu see a joke, please don't take offense to the abruptness. This last betrothal gift of mine has other mysteries, it's related to the matter we're going to discuss later." How could Lin Feng not understand the principle of great kindness and great enmity? After all, the ancient dynasty was not his subordinate. Gu Jun's expression was calm. He also smiled and shook his head. Master of the Celestial Sect of Wonders is too serious. No matter what, we are grateful. Chapter 1376. Since the establishment of Xianmen Tianzong, although there had been occasional killings, they had never conquered other forces with the purpose of subduing them. Today, in the Divine Land, although Xianmen Tianzong occupied a transcendent position, and there were also small forces such as Tianwai Mountain that had clearly submitted to them, but it was others who took the initiative to approach them. Xianmen Tianzong would not take the initiative to suppress and conquer them. Today, Xiao Yan's coming to Longevity City to give the betrothal gift was undoubtedly a joyous occasion. However, Xianmen Tianzong's generous betrothal gift was seen by some people, and it was inevitable that they had other thoughts. For example, did the master of Xianmen's sect, Lin Feng, and his subordinate, Xianmen Tianzong, suddenly change their minds and begin to put all other forces in the Divine Land under their own strong control? At this moment, the betrothal gift was completely beyond everyone's expectations. Would it be a means of coercion, and first using peaceful means before using force? Xianmen Tianzong's first target was the most powerful active force in the Divine Land, the ancient dynasty? However, if the Celestial Sect of Wonders really had such a plan, it would not be wise enough. After all, whether it was the ancient imperial dynasty or the other active human clan forces, they were all forces that were on good terms with the Celestial Sect of Wonders. And the real stumbling block on their road to supremacy was actually Taishu Temple, which had been keeping a low profile and biding its time all these years. Although Xianmen Tianzong had been overthrown from the supreme position in the Divine Land, Taishu Temple was still undoubtedly the second largest force in the Divine Land. Even if Xianmen Tianzong carried out a war of annihilation, the result of attacking Baiyun Mountain by force was unpredictable. Even if they could win, the price they had to pay might not be something they were willing to bear. Relatively speaking, if Xianmen Tianzong really wanted to dominate the Divine Land and rule all living beings, the first target of Mount Shu Sword Sect was more suitable than the ancient dynasty. Thinking of this, everyone felt that their previous guess was not accurate. Therefore, they looked at Lin Feng and his disciples, and felt even more puzzled. On the other hand, the sect leader of the Mount Shu Sword sect, Ji Wenrui, suddenly thought of something. Gu Jun sat on the main seat with a calm expression. After a slight fluctuation in his gaze, he calmed down. He seemed to have some conjectures in his heart. Your sect is really full of talented people. Gu Jun changed the topic. He looked at Duanmu Hong and the others and said with a smile, "The last time I saw this little friend was when Sect Master Lin first visited the world of immortals. Now I can already see the extraordinary scene in the future." Lin Feng smiled and said, "The juniors still need to temper themselves. Fellow Taoist Gu is too polite." Xiao Yan put away the Nanmingli fire and sat down again. The people from the ancient dynasty didn't ask any more questions. Based on Gu Jun's previous reaction, he had basically agreed to accept Xianmen Tianzong's help. However, things like figuring out and deducing Dao techniques would naturally have to wait until after the ceremony to discuss the specific details. After Xianmen Tianzong gave the betrothal gifts, the cultivators from the ancient dynasty accepted the pills, treasures, and many other gifts. Both sides performed other formalities, and Xiao Zhen also appeared in front of everyone. Although Shi and Xiao Yan were still the young among the young in the cultivation world, they were both experts who had reached the primordial spirit realm. Although they accepted the betrothal according to the secular etiquette, they didn't mind showing themselves in front of others. The two of them stood together like a pair of lovers. Naturally, they also received many praises from the cultivators from other forces. Xiao Yin gently held Xiao Zhen hand and said with a low smile, "This is the second most glorious moment in my life. It's even more glorious than when Master gave me the title after the war between the two worlds ended." Xiao Zhen also revealed a smile on her face and nodded her head. She also knew about the moment when Xiao Yan was number one in his heart. It was many years ago, when Xiao Yan was only a 15-year-old boy. At that time, he was at the lowest point of his life. But it was also at that time that he met his current master, Lin Feng, and became Lin Feng's disciple. In Xiao Yan's heart, that was the most glorious moment in his life. It was far more glorious than any time when he traveled the world and shocked the entire divine land. Xiao Zhen had long known this thought in Xiao Yan's heart. At this moment, when she heard what Xiao Yan said, she was not unhappy, but deeply agreed. Although she firmly believed in her feelings for Xiao Yan, and even more firmly believed that they would eventually be together, the road between them could be so smooth, and they could decide to spend the rest of their lives together so early. Wasn't it because of Lin Feng who stood behind Xiao Yan? For a long time, Lin Feng had given preferential treatment to the ancient dynasty. This time, when he came to propose marriage, the wealth of the betrothal gifts shocked the entire divine land. In the entire history of the human cultivation world, even back to the era of the ancient emperors, few people could compare. Back then, someone once joked that Xiao Yan and the others were not the disciples of Lin Feng, the master of the Xianmen sect, but were simply godsons and goddaughters. Naturally, no one dared to say such a joke in front of Lin Feng, but Lin Feng himself almost confirmed these rumors. And he himself obviously didn't care about it. Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhen both turned their heads around to look, seeing that Lin Feng is similarly looking at them with a smile. Looking at his eldest disciple, Lin Feng felt a lot of emotions in his heart for a moment. Unexpectedly, the appearance of Xiao Yan when he first met appeared in front of his eyes. He was dressed in black, had delicate features, but was stubborn and courageous. He was at the lowest point of his life, and his entire person had become cold and stern. There seemed to be a ball of raging fire hidden under his cold and stern appearance, a young man who could explode at any time. When Lin Feng saw him at that time, he was only concerned about his potential value that met the standard of a disciple set by the system. He was concerned about whether his mission could be completed. He was concerned about how great it would be for this talented young man to become his disciple, who had become useless and had his marriage broken off. He was concerned about how great it would be to become Lin Feng's disciple. He was concerned about how stressful it would be to be the grandfather of such a person. Lin Feng laughed in his heart and said, "Xiao Yan, now you are really getting a promotion and a raise, becoming the general manager, becoming the CEO, marrying a fair, rich and beautiful woman, and walking towards the peak of your life. Aren't you a little excited? Oh, forget it, I won't tease you anymore." At this moment, when Lin Feng looked at Xiao Yan, there was only peace and joy in his heart. He was happy for his disciple. The face of the young man in his memory kept changing, and finally, it overlapped with the image of the handsome young man in front of him. He smiled and nodded at Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhener, and Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhener also smiled. As the host, Gu Jun also stood up and personally led Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhener to return the greeting, thanking everyone who came to watch the ceremony. Sword Venerable Flowing Light looked at Xiao Yan, and his heart was at peace. Standing beside him, Purple Cloud Ancestor was also thinking about how Xiao Yan had displayed the Fire Divine technique just now. As for Xiao Yan himself, he was completely convinced. He turned his head to look at the other side. Behind Sword Venerable Flowing Light stood two girls, one in front and one behind. They were both dressed in white. One was full of heroic spirit, and the other was quiet and dignified. They were Sword Venerable Flowing Light's direct disciples, Tao Yaoyao and Murong Yanran. Murong Yanran looked at Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhener, and her expression was also calm, without any fluctuations. She even teased Tao Yaoyao, "Senior sister, did you draw the stroke of the 8 characters between you and God Lord Heluo?" Tao Yaoyao stood there, and her whole person seemed to be one with heaven and earth. Her body flashed like flowing light. Not long ago, she had just successfully proved her primordial spirit path, and became another primordial spirit realm great sword cultivator of Celerita's sword sect, besides her master sword Venerable Flowing Light. In the past, because of fighting with others, her golden elixir cracked, and she, who had wasted hundreds of years, had been cultivating hard these years, and finally shone again. Her sword energy soared into the sky, and she even surpassed Purple Cloud Ancestor, Chinai Ancestor, and many other seniors, breaking through the barrier between heaven and man. Tao Yaoyao was not angry when she heard that. She curled her lips and said with a smile, "Don't joke with hearsay. Do you believe that I won't tear your mouth? But you, if you didn't break the engagement back then, who knows what would happen today?" Murong Yanran smiled slightly. "If I didn't break the engagement, we wouldn't be together. Moreover, that's all in the past, and it's gone with the wind." Tao Yaoyao smiled. "Cultivate hard. This is the path of life that you can only walk by yourself. You can only reap rewards by working hard, and you don't have to rely on others for these rewards." Murong Yanran smiled. "Yes, I will listen to senior sister's teachings." When the engagement ceremony ended successfully, for most of the audience, especially the junior disciples, the things that were more relevant to them just began. To be able to witness the engagement ceremony of Emperor Yen and see the big scene of heroes gathering, for the young cultivators, it was undoubtedly an increase in their experience, and getting to know each other was also a great opportunity to expand their social network. Of course, since there were old grudges between them, it was inevitable that they would feel a little awkward when they met. In the Longevity City, there would be a grand spell conference held together by Xianmen Tianzong and the ancient imperial court, and it was a chance for them to show themselves and hone their magical skills. The junior cultivators who performed outstandingly in this spell conference would receive the rewards prepared by Xianmen Tianzong and the ancient imperial court. The first few winners could even pass through the gate of the Star Sea and enter the desolate ancient Star Sea to be baptized by the primeval starlight. In addition to the spell conference, Xianmen Tianzong and the ancient imperial court would unite to recreate the scene of the ancient times and hold a grand elixir conference. After the ancient times, although elixir conferences were often held in the Divine Land, they were not as grand as before in terms of scale and momentum. However, this time, it was jointly held by Xianmen Tianzong and the ancient imperial court, and it immediately attracted everyone's interest. Previously, Xianmen Tianzong had given many elixirs as betrothal gifts, which made everyone even more excited. In addition to the competition of elixirs, the Elixir Conference was also an important occasion for cultivators to trade and exchange. It brought many opportunities for everyone to exchange for the elixirs they liked, and it also broadened their horizons. For a time, the atmosphere in the Longevity City was flourishing, and it was extraordinarily lively, which was an eye-opener for the junior cultivators. In the Spell Conference and the Elixir Conference, big shots like Lin Feng and Gu Jun naturally silently watched and commented. As for people like Dao Master Thundercloud, Sword Master Tong Tian, and Shi Zongtong, their attention was also focused on what Xianmen Tianzong had revealed. Ancient Emperor Gu Jun was also concerned about what Lin Feng had mentioned. Chapter 1377. According to the tradition of the human cultivation world in the Divine Land, Dharma gatherings like this were mainly meant to test the young cultivators' current cultivation and future development potential to increase their experience. Therefore, they were usually held between cultivators of the Golden Elixir period and the Foundation Establishment period. For Lin Feng and the others, battles of this level were naturally difficult to catch their attention. Those who had outstanding juniors also thought highly of their potential. Among them, the ones who attracted the most attention were undoubtedly the descendants of Xianmen Tianzong. Any one of them would leave a deep impression on the spectators. The reason they attracted the attention of others, apart from their strength, was undoubtedly because of Xianmen Tianzong himself. There had always been an old saying that a genius who died prematurely was not a genius. No matter how much potential one had, if that potential could not be transformed into true strength, it was all in vain. In the past, the dual-pupiled Shi Tianyi, who was killed by Huang's heavenly emperor Shi Tianhao, Liang En, the Marquis Jing Huan, who was killed by Yan Emperor Xiao Yan, and Lei Jie, the dragon steed of the Lei family, who was killed by Tang Jun, were all outstanding talents of their time. They were expected to become legends of their generation. But now, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Even if someone remembered them, they would only leave behind a sigh. However, the group of genius disciples of Xianmen Tianzong had the support of their own sections. While the possibility of them dying prematurely was not completely zero, it was undoubtedly reduced to the lowest. At the same time, the possibility of their deep potential being completely unearthed was raised to the highest. In this way, the possibility of them growing into true powerhouses was naturally extremely high. The young talents who stood out in the Dharma gathering today were very likely to become powerhouses in the future, and not too far in the future. Dao Yuding, Zhou Yunsong, Ying Luoza, Lin Tong, and the others at the Kunlun Mountain Dharma gathering in the past were undoubtedly examples. Therefore, now that the outstanding performance of the junior disciples of Xianmen Tianzong was naturally in the eyes of other forces, they were all marked and paid close attention to them. However, for the young talents of other forces, a single comment from Lin Feng and the others was enough to benefit them greatly and benefit them for the rest of their lives. On the other hand, the Essence Soul Big Shots paid more attention to the exchanges at the Elixir meet. On one hand, although the attainments in alchemy were not completely related to the cultivation realm of a cultivator, relatively speaking, the top alchemy masters were mostly concentrated in the primordial soul realm. The highlight of the elixir gathering, other than helping the younger cultivators advance, was usually carried out among the primordial soul realm cultivators. The rare and precious panaceas that were rarely seen on normal days were naturally the most likely to appear in the elixir gathering that was jointly organized by Xianmen Tianzong and the ancient dynasty. Many of the panaceas were highly sought after even by the strongmen of the primordial divinity realm. Even if they could not use them themselves, their disciples might need them. On the other hand, the development of alchemy didn't seem to have much influence, but it had a long history. It often had an immeasurable influence on future development, and it didn't just affect individuals. If a certain sect came up with a new elixir, it would also attract the attention of others. They would evaluate it and predict the changes that might occur in the long term. Crossing Flame Pill? The sect master of the Blaze Sword sect, the venerable swordsman of the Blaze Sword sect, looked at the type of panaceas that Xianmen Tianzong's third-generation head Duanmu Hong displayed, his gaze moving. The venerable swordsman of the constellation who was sitting beside him faintly smiled. This crossing flame pill of Xianmen Tianzong helps cultivators who train in fire elemental spiritual energy, even absorbing true vicious flames into their body to train. It can give rise to the effects of promotion and protection, reducing the danger and increasing the efficiency. The disciples of Xianmen Tianzong Fentianya will basically all choose one of the 7 great true fires to train in. The more outstanding ones will even choose more than one. The development of this crossing flame pill will undoubtedly benefit the disciples of Fentianya as a whole. And in the world, other than the 7 great true fires which are the strongest firepower, there are also other spiritual fires and many fire elemental spells that all have a huge effect on cultivators. For example, the ancient dynasty cultivators who train in the Nanmingli fire, the reincarnation sect cultivators who train in the red lotus karmic fire, etc. The Blaze Sword sect is a sect of the sword, using the sword to establish their path, using sword chi and sword intent to evolve into raging flames, refining flames to aid their own training. They can also use this pill. Gu Jun glanced at Duanmu Hong, nodding his head and saying, "This is a pill that he figured out himself?" Sure enough, the younger generation will surpass the older. Lin Feng smiled, saying, "There is still room for him to continue improving and strive for perfection. Coming to the pill gathering this time is also to let him experience the pill refining skills of fellow cultivators in the world, in order to exchange and improve." The Emperor of Qin Shi Zongtong said, "Sect Master Lin, it is enough for you and the Flame Emperor to guide him. Both of you are top pill masters in the world." Lin Feng said, "You flatter me, fellow Shi. No matter if it is the path of cultivation or the path of pills, they are both as vast as the ocean. Not mentioning Yuanlong, even me and Xianyan are the same." Shi Zongtong smiled faintly. Sect Master Lin's words are indeed reasonable, but it makes us even more ashamed. Lin Feng shook his head smiling, saying, "What are you saying, fellow Shi? My master and disciple figuring out the art of pill refining is just a personal interest. We have embarrassed ourselves in front of you fellow cultivators." He sat on the large chair, his fingers lightly tapping the armrest as he leisurely said, "I believe that fellow cultivators should already know that one of the 7 seas of Tianyuan, the spirit ocean, is about to reopen." Gu Jun, Shi Zongtong, Ji Wenrui, Bei Rong First Chanyu, Dao Lord Thundercloud and the other big shots all nodded their heads. "That's right, we already know." After the war between the 2 worlds ended back then, there was an uproar in the Tianyuan world that the spirit ocean of the 7 seas of Tianyuan was about to reopen. At the same time that the enchantress released the news, he also spread out a portion of the secret keys that could enter the spirit ocean, causing a huge uproar in the vast Tianhuang continent, causing many parties to fight over them. Amongst those present, there were also people who participated, but the secret keys were rare and it was not easy to fight over them. Very few people had any gains. Furthermore, the power above the Xianhai, Ing Sea, Netherworld Sea, Star Sea, and Empty Sea, it was as if it was everywhere. Nowhere it couldn't be found. Xianmen Tianzong, Taishu Temple, and the Yuta race had already taken the initiative. All sorts of rumors, real and fake, circulated endlessly. In addition to Lin Feng taking in the son of Yu Wang Tianhai as his personal disciple, the grudges between both sides in the war between the two worlds, the opposition between Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, the grudges between the Yuta race and Taishu Temple, the secret origins of the Enchantress, and so on made everyone dizzy. Slowly Lin Feng said, "According to my calculations, the day of the Spirit Ocean reopening is not far away." When the others heard this, their gazes froze as they looked at Lin Feng. According to the rumors, the people who had the deepest understanding of the Spirit Ocean were Xianmen Tianzong, Taishu Temple, and the Yuta race. As Lin Feng said this, he sighed in his heart. Although he had previously felt that the day of the Spirit Ocean reopening might be earlier than when he and the people of Taishu Temple had exited the Spirit Ocean, the degree of advance was much more than what he had expected. The reason was that he had a vague feeling in his heart, and there were some corresponding arrangements that needed to be made decisively. The secret key that was spread out from the hands of the Enchantress is real. Lin Feng first confirmed a guess that everyone had all along, then said, "There is an image of the great Tao returning to its origin in the Spirit Ocean. At the same time, once people enter it, they won't be able to leave in a short period of time." When Gu Jun and the rest heard this, they frowned slightly. They instantly thought of many things, but they didn't interrupt. Instead, they quietly listened to Lin Feng continue to speak. Lin Feng also didn't keep them in suspense and said unhurriedly, "If there are no accidents, I will bring my disciples into the Spirit Sea. The Great Void Monastery will also be the same. Similarly, Yudu clan, with Clan Master Yudu's 12 illusory sons as the leader, I believe the top practitioners will also enter." The fight for the Spirit Ocean was of great importance. No matter if it was Lin Feng, Taishu Temple, or the Yudu race, they would all fight with all their might. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if they could completely control the Spirit Ocean, even if they had to pay the price of Ocean Sanctuary, White Cloud Mountain, or Yuta Royal City, it would still be worth it. And the final ownership of the Spirit Ocean would undoubtedly affect the power structure of the entire heaven primordial world. Slowly, Ji Wenrui said, however, "Can the Spirit Ocean, which is even stronger than Mysterious Sea, Ocean Sanctuary, and Netherworld Seas, be completely controlled by one person? We all know that even though the Void Temple turned the Spirit Sea into a heavenly realm in the past, they only grasped a stable passageway into the Spirit Sea. They are still 108,000 li away from controlling the Spirit Sea." Lin Feng smiled faintly. "Times have changed. If we're talking about opportunities, this is the most suitable one." He looked around at everyone. However, even though the Enchantress has spread the secret key to the Spirit Ocean, there is a limit to it, and only a small number of people will obtain it. To prevent others from coveting it, they will usually keep it a secret, so we don't know who among the strong practitioners of the demon race will have the chance to enter the Spirit Ocean like the Enchantress. Let's not talk about the cultivators of our divine land. The situation over at Heaven Wasteland Vastland is confusing now, and it's hard to know what they are planning. Lin Feng didn't finish his sentence, but Gu Jun and the rest had undoubtedly understood what he meant. Their expressions instantly became solemn. If Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple were to head to the Spirit Ocean together, the human cultivation world of the Divine Land would immediately become extremely weak. Although it was a bit embarrassing, the people present would not deceive themselves at this time. The Xian Gate Sky Sect and the Void Temple were not here. In the face of a peak great demon, other than the ancient imperial dynasty and the Mount Shu Sword Sect, the other forces in the entire divine continent would find it difficult to contend against it. If Shi Xingyun was willing to help, the Great Qin dynasty could be considered as the third force. Even though the Yuta race and the Enchantress would most likely head to the Spirit Ocean, and the Phoenix race wouldn't take the initiative to invade the Divine Land, there were still the Dragon race and the primordial Devil Ape race in Heaven Wasteland Vastland. It was hard to predict whether they would obtain the secret key, enter the Spirit Ocean, or stay in the world. If these two forces attacked with full force, even the ancient dynasty, Mount Shu Sword Sect, and the Great Qin dynasty would be under great pressure. Furthermore, the future Master Buddha had descended into the world and revived Buddhism, but traces of him had been hard to find. When Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple were no longer around, it was also unknown what they would do. The king of the underworld had gone into seclusion after being severely injured back then, so no one knew what his current situation was. Gu Jun looked at Lin Feng and nodded slightly. The last betrothal gift from Xianmen Tianzong, the improved Li Fire divine art, and the things that had been foretold were indeed here. Chapter 1378. For the cultivators of Xianmen Tianzong, if Lin Feng went to the spiritual sea with the top powerhouses in the sect, the other people in the sect would be safe with Ying Hai as their backup. There would definitely be a huge difference between the others managing Ying Hai and Lin Feng. If the outside world wanted to break through it, it would be impossible. With the return of the will of the Xiantian treasure tree, even if Lin Feng entered the spiritual sea, the Xiantian treasure tree and Yujing Mountain could still hide in the void and would not show themselves like last time. With such double insurance, Lin Feng could be said to be the person with the least worries. However, it was hard to say what would happen to the other human forces in the Divine Land. As long as 3 great demons of the Age of Enlightenment came to the Divine Land, the human cultivation world would be under great pressure. The most worrisome was the Lord of the Dragon Clan, Tenryu Zhen, who was in the middle tribulation stage. After losing the deterrence of Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, once he stepped out of Ying Hai and set foot on the Divine Land, the human world would immediately be in a precarious situation. Lin Feng looked at the crowd and said slowly, "My sword attendant, Xuanli, will not enter the spiritual sea with me. She will stay in the Divine Land. However, the Divine Land is vast, and even she can only stay in one place to serve as a deterrent. However, if the demons fully invade, it is inevitable that she will lose sight of the others. Fellow Taoists, you should also prepare for a rainy day." When they heard that Lin Feng would leave the sky punishment sword in the Divine Land and not bring it into the spiritual sea, everyone's eyes lit up. After hearing Lin Feng's words, they also nodded slightly. The Xianmen Heavenly Sect had Mount Yujing and Ying Hai as the foundation barrier to protect their own disciples. Although they could also try to beg the Xianmen Heavenly Sect to allow them to climb Mount Yujing or enter Ying Hai to take refuge, in this way, the defense on the vast land of the Divine Land would be completely empty, and the whole world would inevitably suffer a great disaster. As for the spoils and fruits of victory from the war between the two worlds, it was equivalent to handing them over without any resistance. More importantly, the foundations of countless forces might be destroyed. The cultivators of Xianmen Tianzong could defend first and then retreat according to the situation. However, the other forces might not have enough time to react. If they wanted to retreat to Yujing Mountain or Ying Hai to take refuge, they could only retreat as soon as possible. However, in this way, the territory that could still be defended by great demons of higher realms was now completely empty. Any demon clan that had attained the undying demon soul realm or even the demon king realm could cause great destruction and rampage as they pleased. Although it was said that as long as there was life, there was hope, but unless it was absolutely necessary, no force would give up their sect's foundation for nothing. After all, situations like Xianmen Tianzong's Yujing Mountain were far too rare. No matter which sect it was, the sect's foundation had been built up over a long period of time. Not only was the sect's defense strong, but the spiritual energy in the sect's veins had also been painstakingly improved by generations of predecessors, making it extremely suitable for the sect's disciples to cultivate. If the ancestral master of any sect wanted to establish a sect, he would definitely choose a place with abundant spiritual energy. If only the sect was destroyed, it might take a lot of time, energy, and resources, but it might be possible to rebuild it. However, if even the spiritual energy in the local veins was completely destroyed, there would be no possibility of rebuilding, and they would have to find another place. In this way, the force would be greatly weakened. Since the development of the human cultivation world in the Divine Land, most of the blessed lands with abundant spiritual energy were already occupied. Unless they had never been discovered, they were almost never left unused. If the sect of many forces was destroyed, it would be very difficult for each of them to find a suitable place to rebuild their sect. As for the resources, mines, spirit herbs, and spiritual fields that belonged to each force, it would be fine if they could take them away. If they couldn't, they would naturally stay where they were and watch the big demons come to them. Generally speaking, be it the demons of planet Tianhuang or the human cultivators of the divine continent, unless there was a deep hatred between them, the main purpose of the war was to occupy resources and grotto heavens and treasures. Purely destructive attacks rarely happened. However, the situation now was special. It was hard to predict what the demons, who had just suffered a huge loss in the war between the two worlds, would do. Maybe they would also be worried that after the Battle of the Spirit Sea ended, Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple would return to the boundless world and launch a counterattack. However, no one could be sure what the outcome of the Battle of the Spirit Sea would be. The strongest Yuta race among the demons would definitely enter the Spirit Sea and fight with Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple. The situation in the Spirit Sea was complicated and special. Even if Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple wanted to work together to kick the demons out first and then decide the winner among the humans, it could only exist in their imagination. It was hard to put it into action. By then, both sides could only plan on their own. When they really met each other, it would probably be the most crucial moment to decide victory or defeat. At that time, there would naturally be no need to talk about who would give way. Everyone could only fight for it with all their might. It was also because of this special situation that the enchantress and the others had the chance to fish in troubled waters. As Lin Feng had said, if Xianli stayed in the Divine Land to guard it, she would naturally be able to deter the demons. However, the Divine Land was vast, and she might not be able to defend it perfectly. Even though Xianli could move on her own, if the demons really barged into the Divine Land, they would try their best to avoid her. Lin Feng said, "Fellow Taoists, there's no need to worry too much. Once I and Tai One Venerable from Taishu Temple enter the Spirit Sea, we will definitely be cut off from the outside world. However, we don't know when we will be able to return. Even though the demons are wild, we will always be tense. As long as the situation in the Divine Land doesn't collapse instantly and can be delayed for some time, under the care of my sword attendant Xianli, there shouldn't be any big problems." Gu Jun, Shi Zongtang, and the rest looked at Lin Feng and slowly nodded their heads. In the end, heaven helps those who help themselves. Even if heaven punishment's sword hung above the divine continent to deter the demons, if they really wanted to be safe and sound, they still had to rely on their own abilities. Reinforcements flew to the rescue, but those waiting to be rescued couldn't even slow down the enemy's footstep. They were all dealt with directly, and everything was for naught. In a huge opportunity, there was naturally a huge danger, and the battle for the Spirit Sea was the same. The great Qin Emperor, Shi Zongtang, sat on his seat with his brows furrowed. He was deep in thought, as if he was having a hard time making a decision. His gaze looked towards Lin Feng, his gaze revealing a bit of struggle, but then became calm, his tightly furrowed brows gradually relaxing, his expression once again becoming calm and without ripples. Over the years, although Shi Xingyun would occasionally return to West Hill City to visit his mother and brother Shi Chongyun, he still maintained a distance from the Great Qin dynasty. The Great Qin dynasty urgently needed to strengthen itself. The path of karma of Buddhism and the successive changes of the Li Fire divine technique of the ancient dynasty finally made Shi Zongtang make up his mind to give it a try. If the Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique could be successfully improved, not only would the cultivators of the great Qin dynasty benefit, but the defensive formation of West Hill City and the qi of the dragon veins that the throne of the great Qin dynasty could absorb would also be improved. If these changes were to be considered as a drop in the bucket in a short period of time, the improved Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique would also be of great help to Shi Xingyun. For Shi Xingyun, the speed at which he was improving had gradually slowed down. It was time for him to achieve a breakthrough and improve further. Shi Xingyun was close to Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao in Xianmen Tianzong. He also knew that Shi Xingyun and Zhu Yi had also discussed Tao. However, the Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique was a top-notch orthodoxy of the great Qin dynasty. Unlike the Great Tempest Temple, which had long been destroyed, the great Qin dynasty still existed. Furthermore, they had always been close to Xianmen Tianzong. Therefore, Xianmen Tianzong would not directly bypass them and touch the Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique. Shi Zongtang and the others did not feel the feedback from the Tao of heaven and earth. Similarly, although Shi Xingyun had almost left the great Qin dynasty and was like a rogue cultivator, when she discussed Tao with Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, and the others, it was only about the Tao of heaven and earth. She did not reveal the specific secrets of the Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique to Xianmen Tianzong. However, just like in the ancient dynasty, if Xianmen Tianzong really had the ability to help improve the primordial Tao of longevity technique, the final betrothal gift would undoubtedly be more important than all the previous gifts. If Xianmen Tianzong really helped the great Qin dynasty improve the Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique, it would be a great favor. However, Shi Zongtang had no choice but to seriously consider this matter. This was because no one could be sure if the dragon tribe had obtained the secret key to enter the spiritual sea. No one knew if the dragon tribe would go to the spiritual sea or stay in the colossal world when the spiritual sea was opened. The great Qin dynasty even suspected that even if the dragon tribe had obtained the secret key to the spiritual sea, they would not enter the spiritual sea immediately. Instead, they would wait for Xianmen Tianzong and the Taishu Temple to enter the spiritual sea. Then, they would rush to the Divine Land to deal with the Qin dynasty and Shi Xingyun at the risk of losing the opportunity to fight for the spiritual sea. This time, without Lin Feng and the Taishu Temple, Tenryu Zhen, who was in the middle tribulation stage, would set foot in the Divine Land. Unless Xuanli stayed in West Hill City, the great Qin dynasty would immediately face a disaster. In fact, the Qin dynasty had been seriously considering this issue for the past few years. This was also a way for them to show their goodwill when they tried to bring Shi Xingyun back to the great Qin dynasty. And this time after seeing that ball of Nanming Li fire in Xiao Yan's hands before and also finding out from Lin Feng that the Spirit Sea isn't far from reopening, Shi Zongtang finally gradually made up his mind. Similar to Shi Zongtang, the other cultivators were also feeling complicated. Countless thoughts were running through their minds. Lin Feng looked at the people around him and said calmly, "We are all from the same faction in the Divine Land. I do not wish to see any of us suffer a calamity. In 3 days' time, I will borrow the treasured land of the ancient emperor to give a lecture. If you are interested, you can send your disciples here. Take it as a token of my sincerity." When the people heard this, their bodies trembled slightly. They could tell that Lin Feng was implying that any of them could seek help from Xianmen Tianzong to perfect their Tao. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.